Welcome to the deep dive. You know why you're here. You've given us the sources, the notes, the content. And our mission isn't just to, summarize what's in them. Today, we're doing a real deep dive into the mechanics of articulation.
Exactly. And this is a fascinating one because we're looking at material that covers, well, really ordinary topics, almost mundane stuff.
Right.
Your daily schedule, how you pick a shirt, whether you read the news, and we're dissecting the linguistic and conceptual strategies that take those basic answers and turn them into something genuinely insightful. We're trying to find that level of communication where a listener just goes, wow, okay, that person is truly well-informed.
We're essentially cracking the code on what high-level communication really is. It's about blending these sophisticated linguistic techniques. We're talking advanced tenses, nuanced idiomatic phrasing, complex sentence structures, and blending all of that with real-world specific cultural context. The sources often bring up life in Ho Chi Minh City or Saigon, which immediately grounds the language in something tangible, something vivid.
It does. And it proves this isn't just about being grammatically correct.
Not at all.
It's about making your language memorable, impactful. It's the difference between just stating a fact and, giving the context, the nuance, and even the psychological reason behind that fact.
It turns a simple answer into a mini essay?
Yes. A mini essay on personal philosophy or how you adapt to your environment.
Okay, so our focus today, which we've pulled directly from your source material, is split into 4 main areas. Section 1 is the architecture of describing your day and using high-level grammar. 2 is how we see and use color for personal identity. 3, the absolute necessity of staying current with the news and navigating all that information fragmentation out there. And finally, the pursuit of health through activity and cultural passion. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with Section 1, the art of daily description and high-level grammar. So we're starting with the linguistic foundations, how to describe something as personal as your daily routine with sophistication. And the sources hit us right away with 2 non-negotiable strategies for showing you have that advanced command. The first one is, surprisingly, it's pretty simple. It's paraphrasing.
Simple in concept, but so difficult to execute, especially when you're under pressure.
Yeah.
Paraphrasing is really the gatekeeper to advanced fluency. If you're aiming for that sophistication, you have to signal immediately that you're not just mimicking or reciting phrases you've learned. The source material is very emphatic on this. Never repeat the vocabulary from the question.
So if the interviewer asks, do you like spending time outside? You can't just say, yes, I like it.
Exactly. Replying with something like, I am quite fond of spending time outdoors. That's the absolute foundational first step.
I get that. It's not just about swapping in a synonym. It's about demonstrating a deeper lexical range and an immediate cognitive flexibility. If you can't generate a different way to say it on the fly, it suggests your grasp is more mechanical.
It's not internalized.
Exactly. But how far do you push that? I mean, should you aim for complexity even when a simple answer would work?
That's a really critical question. The goal isn't complexity for its own sake.
Yeah.
It's about control. A high-level speaker should have a whole spectrum of ways to say yes.
Okay.
So instead of just I like, you might have I derive a great deal of satisfaction from, or I find myself naturally inclined towards, or even it's a practice I have embraced wholeheartedly. Each one of those communicates a slightly different relationship with the activity.
From just enjoyment to real dedication.
Precisely. And the key is using the right phrase in the right context.
That makes sense. It's about calibration. And calibrating for reality often needs structural complexity, which brings us to the next point, the crucial role of the second conditional. The sources really highlight that when you're answering hypothetical questions, especially ones starting with would you, what you have to use that structure. If I were you, I would.
This is a massive grammatical signpost,
Yeah.
a huge one. The second conditional lets you engage with modality, the ability to express possibility or necessity about a situation that isn't real. It's contrary to fact.
A future hypothetical.
Yes. So if someone asks, would you ever quit your job and travel the world? And you reply, if I quit my job, I will travel. Well, that's the wrong tense. It reduces this fascinating hypothetical down to a simple, kind of unnuanced prediction.
But I do wonder, doesn't always defaulting to a formal structure like if I were you, I would risk sounding a bit stiff, a bit overly formal in a normal conversation?
It's a calculated risk, but the benefit usually outweighs it, especially in a context where you need to show some intellectual rigor. The formality of the second conditional signals intellectual nuance.
You're signaling to the listener.
You're signaling, I understand this isn't real, and I'm engaging with it on a purely analytical, hypothetical level. Using the simple present or will implies a certainty about a decision you haven't even made. The second conditional proves you're capable of reasoned judgment, even when you don't have all the facts. It's really the grammar of sophisticated critical thinking.
That's a powerful way to put it. It shows you can mentally juggle variables and outcomes. Okay, so let's shift from the mechanics of grammar to the rhythm of the day. The sources use some great idiomatic phrasing to paint a picture of energy cycles. We see these natural phrases like needing a coffee fix or something to get me going.
These naturalisms are like the fingerprints of true fluency. They're highly contextual and very economical. When you say you need a coffee fix, you communicate the necessity, the habit, the slight dependence on caffeine, all in 3 short words.
Instead of a literal translation like, I need my coffee because it helps me start my day.
Right, which is just clunky. The idiom is punchier. It signals you're comfortable with the lived, everyday language, not just translated textbook phrases.
And the source material immediately grounds this energy cycle in a dose of realism by talking about time-dependent productivity. So you get the ideal working best in the morning, but it's immediately followed by a critical condition, provided one feels rested.
Yes.
That little injection of realism, that acknowledgement of human limits, feels key.
That conditional phrase is vital. It manages the listener's expectations and adds a layer of credibility. Nobody is perfectly productive all the time, so including that little caveat, provided I've had a good night's sleep, makes the speaker seem honest and self-aware. It stops the statement from sounding like some generic aspirational nonsense.
And then we get the detailed anecdote about the opposite, the less effective reality, pulling an all-nighter. The crucial detail here is that the brain shuts down after 3 a.m.
I think this detail is really worth pausing on. It's so specific, almost arbitrary, but it's incredibly effective. Why 3 a.m.? Because it creates what you might call a cognitive residue.
A cognitive residue.
Yeah, a general statement like, I get too tired to work late, is completely forgettable. But a specific quantified claim, my productivity drops to 0 at 3 a.m., that becomes a memorable data point.
So the goal isn't necessarily scientific accuracy, it's persuasive authenticity.
Precisely. That specific number lends a kind of authority and relatability to the claim. It shows the speaker has actually reflected on their own cognitive limits enough to put a time on it. For you, the listener, this is a really practical takeaway. When you're making a general point about a budget, a habit, a strategy, try injecting a specific detailed number or example.
Like, I check my portfolio at exactly 7 a.m.
Yes, or I allocate 20% of my time to deep work. That kind of specificity makes the claim feel anchored and trustworthy.
That's excellent advice. And this detailed routine is then immediately grounded in local specifics in the HCMC Saigon context. The routine begins not just with coffee, but with a Vietnamese-style café soda from a street vendor.
This is cultural fluency in action. The speaker isn't just naming a drink. They're referencing the whole experience, the street vendor, the local environment, and the specific way it's made. It grounds the abstract idea of morning coffee in this tangible, culturally specific ritual that just instantly transports the listener.
It shows you're fluent in the environment, not just the language.
Exactly.
And that continues with the practical need for a cold shower, which is tied directly to the environment. Given the heat in Saigon, it is incredibly refreshing.
This is just a masterclass in justifying a personal habit with environmental necessity. The cold shower isn't some random quirk, it's an adaptation. By explicitly linking the action, the cold shower, to the environment, the Saigon heat, the speaker makes their routine seem logical and validated. It shows a mature awareness of how your environment dictates your behavior, which is a hallmark of a sophisticated worldview.
So after establishing this very structured climate-aware routine, where does the speaker find any peace in this chaotic setting? The sources point to the early morning, around 5:30 or 6:00 a.m., and this concept of tranquility.
Again, the power is all in the contrast.
Yeah.
Finding tranquility that can be found even in a chaotic city like Saigon before the madness begins. That's a rhetorical technique. It elevates the speaker from someone who just has a routine to someone who is a conscious observer, capable of carving out personal peace inside of environmental intensity.
And they use this elevated descriptive vocabulary, calling the sunrise over the Saigon River a glorious sight. Why use a word like glorious instead of, I don't know, nice or beautiful?
Well, glorious carries some significant emotional weight, doesn't it? It implies a sense of awe, majesty, or deep personal reverence. A speaker who uses that word isn't just reporting a visual fact. They're conveying an emotional response, a philosophical connection to the world around them. It really illustrates the technique of using high-level vocabulary for aesthetic and emotional impact. It perfectly contrasts the city's intensity with their personal, elevated peacefulness.
And that's the synthesis.
That's it. When you put together the complex grammar, the culturally specific detail, and the emotionally resonant vocabulary, you get that compelling high-level articulation that we're trying to dissect.
That structural analysis takes us perfectly into section 2, where we shift from the daily rhythm to perception and presentation, specifically through the strategic use of color. And this section kicks off with a really vital warning about the dangers of overreaching with your vocabulary.
Yes, the Band 6 warning, as the critique in the source called it. This is such a common failure point for intermediate speakers trying to sound advanced. The risk is just extremely high when speakers abuse big words that they can't properly control.
Right, like using a word like ephemeral when you just mean temporary, but then you realize you don't know the right preposition to go with it.
Exactly. And if a listener tries to use a highly specialized term, but then botches the standard usage, maybe they mix up a transitive and an intransitive verb, or use a preposition that just doesn't fit, it immediately undermines all the complexity they were trying to build. It signals ambition without control.
Which is often seen pretty negatively.
It creates cognitive dissonance for the listener. They hear the sophisticated word, but they also hear that it's being used incorrectly. It's so much better to use common, precise vocabulary with perfect grammatical accuracy than to risk awkward usage with an overly complex word. You have to have control over the basic tools before you try for the advanced flourishes.
And speaking of control, we need to talk about tense flexibility. When it comes to color preferences, the sources really emphasize the need to handle changes over time. So if you're asked about what you liked as a kid, you have to be able to switch immediately and fluidly to "I used to," or the past simple.
Oh, tense flexibility is the absolute backbone of narrative coherence. Color preferences are a perfect example of a topic that demands that kind of temporal awareness. If you're telling a story about why you preferred purple as a child, but now you prefer gray, the listener needs clear grammatical signposts to tell the difference.
To separate the past state from the present state.
Right. Using "I used to," or the past perfect, shows the listener that you can mentally time travel and report accurately on historical preferences and distinguish them clearly from today's reality.
Okay, let's move to the practical and psychological side of color choice. The speaker's perennial favorite is blue, specifically denim for trousers, which is described as a go-to. But the fascinating linguistic choice here is describing blue as a forgiving color.
The adjective forgiving is just a brilliant linguistic leap, isn't it?
It is.
It's usually applied to people or maybe situations that tolerate flaws, but here it's applied to an inanimate thing, a color. And the source analysis confirms the meaning is all about practicality. It hides flaws, or specifically in the Saigon context, it doesn't show stains easily, which is practical for the dusty streets here.
That connection is so profound because it pulls an abstract aesthetic preference right back into a brutal practical reality. We saw the Saigon heat necessitating a cold shower. Now we see the dusty streets necessitating a forgiving color.
It's another intellectual adaptation strategy, but articulated beautifully. And this elevates the communication from a simple subjective taste, "I like blue," to objective reasoned decision-making.
I choose blue because...
I choose blue because it optimizes my presentation given my environment. When you justify your preference with external factors like climate, environment, practicality, you demonstrate a mature, reasoned approach to how you present yourself.
And this strategic approach continues when they talk about shopping. Color is described as playing a critical role, something that can make or break an item, and also something that can help disguise physical limitations.
This is where color becomes a tactical tool. The source material presents the color palette not as some accident, but as an active part of managing perception. It shows the speaker is keenly aware of the visual impact of their clothing choices and uses color to optimize how they look.
Which naturally leads us to a superb example of sophisticated humor and self-deprecation. The speaker uses the term vertically challenged, a polite, witty euphemism for being short, and combines it with the fashion strategy of wearing monochromatic or dark colors to create the illusion of height.
That phrase, vertically challenged, is such a clear indicator of high fluency and a cultural sensitivity to using humor for potentially awkward topics. It adds a sophisticated, self-aware, and frankly, a highly charming tone. But we should dig into the psychological benefit of a technique like that.
Yeah, why is strategic humor so effective in a high-level conversation?
Because it completely disarms the listener and creates immediate rapport. By acknowledging a perceived limitation, being short, with a witty, self-deprecating term, the speaker sort of preempts any judgment and shows confidence.
They're showing they're comfortable with themselves.
Comfortable enough to joke about a personal trait. It immediately makes them seem relatable and trustworthy, while at the same time proving their linguistic dexterity. It's so much more effective than just saying, "I'm short, so I wear dark clothes."
It definitely takes confidence to use humor strategically. It shows social intelligence. And conversely, their preference is also defined by what they actively avoid. The speaker chooses to shy away from colors that are attention-grabbing or in your face.
Attention-grabbing and in-your-face are very dynamic, almost aggressive ways to describe loud colors, aren't they? The speaker is showing a clear preference for discretion and subtlety. They prefer to blend in rather than stand out, favoring muted colors like beige, navy, or gray.
Which reflects a deliberate philosophical stance on presentation, doesn't it? It suggests an intentional avoidance of visual noise. And when you combine that with their preference for early morning tranquility, you start to build a very consistent profile of a thoughtful, measured individual.
Absolutely. The decision to select muted colors confirms a desire for a kind of a subtle elegance. This whole section really illustrates that sophisticated communication isn't just about describing what you like. It's about using controlled vocabulary, strategic humor, and psychological reasoning to explain why your choices reflect a coherent personal philosophy that adapts to both your social and environmental contexts.
Okay, moving on to section 3. We're shifting from personal presentation to social awareness, looking at the modern consumption of information, the news, and the language we use to talk about speculation and future trends. But before we get into the analysis, the sources give us a fundamental reminder about listening skills.
This is the most foundational part, and it's so often overlooked. You have to correctly understand the question before you can give a sophisticated answer. The sources really stress the need to distinguish between a habitual question, "Do you often?" and a preference question, "Do you like?"
And if you fail that distinction, it's immediately distracting no matter how fancy your answer is. If you say, "Yes, I like reading the news," to a question about how often you read it, you've just missed the core request.
Yeah.
It signals a lack of attentiveness, which is, the total opposite of being well-informed.
And once you've correctly parsed the question, the next linguistic strategy is to move beyond simple declaration, especially when you're talking about the future of news or media. This requires using complex speculation structures, things like, "This probably will," or "I highly doubt that," when you're discussing trends.
This brings us right back to the importance of modality that we talked about with conditionals. When a speaker uses a phrase like, "I highly doubt that," they're not just guessing. They're not just offering some vague opinion.
No, they're presenting a reasoned conviction based on their current analysis. They're projecting a calculated degree of certainty or skepticism.
Right.
So, for example, if you're asked about the future of print media, a high-level response wouldn't be, "Newspapers will disappear." Instead, you might use, "I highly doubt that physical newspapers will disappear entirely, but I predict that consolidation will drastically reduce the number of major publications."
That's a much more structured speculation. It acknowledges complexity and shows you've actually analyzed the trends before you came up with a nuanced position.
Exactly.
And speaking of current knowledge, the sources confirm the modern reality of news consumption. It's driven by the digital age, being able to access the latest developments at the click of a button.
That phrase, "click of a button," is basically a shorthand idiom now for instant, pervasive access. It perfectly encapsulates the modern habit listening to podcasts, scrolling through social media feeds on your commute. It acknowledges that reading the news is no longer a static activity with a piece of paper.
It's dynamic, it's continuous.
It's a continuous process that includes audio, visual, and digital consumption all day long.
But the real depth here comes when the sources explain why this daily consumption is so essential. They use these strong collocations to connect knowledge to action. We see the world described as ever-evolving, which makes it crucial to stay on top of things.
Ever-evolving immediately signals a dynamic, high-stakes environment where standing still is dangerous. To counter that pace of change, the speaker has to actively strive to stay on top of things. That set phrase conveys commitment and shows an awareness of the nonstop nature of global information flow. It makes the act of consuming news sound like an active, demanding responsibility.
And the reason for this commitment is twofold, linking information directly to ambition and to safety. First, career growth. Educating yourself about global events lets you seize opportunities.
This is the pragmatic value proposition of being informed. News isn't a leisure activity. It's a competitive advantage. If you're aware of geopolitical shifts, emerging technologies, policy changes, if you read about a new government incentive for a certain industry, that knowledge lets you anticipate market shifts and position yourself for career advancement. You can't seize an opportunity if you don't even know it exists.
And second, knowledge acts as a defense. Being informed alerts you to dangers lurking out there. The sources specifically bring up new scams or public health issues.
Lurking out there is incredibly effective language, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's almost suspenseful. It personifies danger, and it frames the pursuit of news as a matter of personal safety. In today's world, danger isn't just physical. It's financial. It's digital. Being informed alerts you to phishing scams, policy changes, the early signs of a public health concern. The source material effectively frames news consumption as both a tool for maximizing opportunity and a tool for minimizing risk.
Finally, the sources give us this fascinating piece of social commentary about generational differences in what news people focus on. The observation is made, contrary to popular belief, that both young and old generations care about the news, but the type of news they care about differs significantly.
This is a hallmark of sophisticated analysis. You refute a simple popular assumption with a more nuanced truth. It rejects the easy generalization that young people are just ignorant. Instead, it argues that their interest hasn't disappeared. It's just fragmented and diversified, and it's driven by the mechanics of the platforms they use.
And the divide is noted. Older people might prefer politics, whereas young people gravitate toward trendy events or celebrity coverage, often influenced by the pervasive influence of pop culture. We should probably explore this pervasive influence. What are the mechanisms behind this fragmentation?
This is where we get into media studies, really. The influence is pervasive because of two main factors: platform design and algorithms. Younger generations are primarily consuming content that's distributed by algorithms optimized for rapid engagement.
Short video clips, aggregated news feeds, influencer content.
Exactly. And those algorithms naturally favor what's trending, what's immediate, and what's visually compelling, which very often means pop culture and celebrity gossip.
So the very language of the news itself changes depending on the platform. News about politics might be dense, text-based, and requires sustained attention, whereas news about a celebrity event is designed to be consumed quickly, visually, and shared instantly.
Precisely. And the language reflects that. Traditional news uses formal, often detached language. News consumed through the lens of pop culture often uses highly emotive, slang-heavy, and immediate language to create a communal reaction and encourage sharing. So while the substance might differ, politics versus celebrity, the act of consuming, prioritizing, and discussing information is still there. High-level communication requires you to integrate that external sociological context, the why behind media fragmentation, into your personal observations.
Okay. Our final section dives into the language used to describe health, physical activity, teamwork, and local cultural passions. And it starts, again, with linguistic precision related to exercise.
It always comes back to the fundamentals. The baseline is accuracy. The sources remind us of these essential collocations, correctly using do yoga and play sports.
Yeah.
This simple distinction, the verb choice, is just non-negotiable for clarity. Using the wrong verb suggests you haven't internalized the linguistic patterns.
Building on that required accuracy, the speaker then needs to show flexibility in their preference language, avoiding the repetitive "I like." The sources suggest some highly effective alternatives, like "I have a soft spot for," "I take a keen interest in," or "I'm a big fan of."
These phrasal alternatives allow for emotional calibration. Let's break down the nuance. If you say you have a soft spot for running, it's just a fond, maybe slightly nostalgic preference, something you started casually. But if you say you take a keen interest in weightlifting, that implies active involvement, study, maybe a level of intellectual curiosity about the technique. It lets the speaker use sophisticated phrasing to communicate the exact degree of their emotional connection to the activity.
That attention to nuance really is the essence of sophisticated description. Okay, so then the sources dive into a detailed discussion of modern health. The speaker acknowledges working a desk job, which leads to a sedentary lifestyle, and the need to counter this by being fairly active, specifically lifting weights 4 times a week, is presented as a necessary countermeasure.
This is a highly realistic, strategic way of framing modern physical activity. They identify the occupational hazard, the sedentary lifestyle, using precise health vocabulary, and then they present exercise as a deliberate, quantified solution. And the ultimate goal is framed as longevity.
And the principle they use is that exercise goes a long way for the sake of that longevity.
That idiomatic phrase, "goes a long way," is so powerful because it suggests disproportionate long-term benefits from consistent, moderate effort. It's a statement about compounding returns, but applied to your physical health. By linking their weightlifting to specific high-level health vocabulary like sedentary lifestyle and the strategic goal of longevity, the speaker proves they're thinking about health holistically and strategically, not just as a quick fix. Next, the sources stress the developmental benefits of team sports, using this active, assertive language. The assertion is that sports do wonders for a child's physical and mental development.
Do wonders is a strong, concise collocation. It just communicates intense positive impact immediately. But the second benefit is arguably even more crucial. The social and cognitive advantage of team sports actively instilling the value of teamwork in children.
Let's focus on that verb, instill. Why is instill a more advanced choice than just saying teach or show? To instill something suggests implanting a value or a habit deeply into someone's character, usually gradually or through repeated influence. It suggests that teamwork isn't some superficial lesson you learn one day. It's a fundamental, deliberately built character trait that has to be actively cultivated through structured activity. This elevates the whole discussion from just physical education to crucial character development.
Preparation for adult professional life.
Absolutely, where collaboration and teamwork are essential.
Now we anchor the discussion in local cultural context. When asked about popular sports, the answer is decisive, using another high fluency marker. Football is hands down the king sport in Vietnam, and they note the intense passion for it.
Hands down expresses absolute conviction, total certainty. It adds real weight to the claim that football dominates. And identifying it as the king sport and referencing the intense passion provides that essential cultural anchor. If you're going to speak articulately about a place, you have to be able to comment intelligently on its popular culture. It shows cultural fluency right alongside linguistic fluency.
We also get a balanced view on risk versus reward. The sources note that while some parents might balk at the prospect of their kids getting hurt, the argument is made that a scraped knee is just a minor setback compared to the tremendous health benefits they gain.
This exchange is so crucial because it demonstrates the ability to weigh opposing viewpoints, which is a key sign of a sophisticated conversation. To balk at the prospect is a very specific way of expressing hesitant refusal or apprehension. By refuting that hesitation with the phrase minor setback, the speaker shows they've considered the legitimate risks, but ultimately they prioritize the long-term benefit.
They're not being dismissive.
Not at all. They're prioritizing based on a mature, reasoned assessment of the overall gain.
And finally, we see the language used to describe high-risk, high-reward activities, the whole adrenaline rush idea.
This is where the language becomes aspirational and defining. The speaker describes themselves as a daredevil who loves the rush of adrenaline. These are strong, personal identifiers that paint a very dynamic, vivid image of their personality and their tolerance for risk.
And their aspirations are framed using bucket list dreams. Skydiving is mentioned as an item to cross off my bucket list one day.
Crossing off the bucket list is a universal modern idiom for achieving these high-stakes, life-defining goals. It moves the discussion from their current physical routines like lifting weights to these ambitious, forward-looking goals. The language used in this final segment really proves the speaker can articulate both a grounded routine and ambitious, personality-driven goals, all while using compelling, culturally resonant language. #tagoutro.
We have thoroughly completed our deep dive into these four, well, seemingly simple topics, and the consistency of the strategy is really what stands out to me. High-level communication isn't just about throwing in random complex words. It's about structural sophistication, like the flawless use of conditionals and those fluid shifts between past and present tenses.
And it is absolutely about specificity and vivid detail. That detail is what transforms a generic statement into a memorable insight. Think about the detail of grabbing a Saigon cafe sua and the necessary cold shower, or the dusty streets making blue a forgiving color.
Or that specific cognitive limit. The brain shuts down after 3 a.m.
Right. Those details are the linguistic anchors that make everything stick.
And crucially, we learned about the strategic use of idiomatic language. Phrases like, get me going, forgiving color, hands down, and goes a long way. These are the real markers of authentic, deep-seated fluency. They signal comfort and depth in the language and the culture it's describing.
To synthesize all this, the sources prove that being well-informed requires not only consuming information, like accessing news at the click of a button, but also Understanding and articulating the broader context. That context might be local culture, like the intense passion for football, or it might be personal presentation strategy, like using self-deprecating humor or choosing colors to optimize your appearance.
Mhm.
The most engaging and impressive communication always balances that strategic complexity with linguistic precision and, relatable, authentic human details.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We spent this entire deep dive analyzing the strategies that help a speaker contrast their reality with their ideals. We looked at the desire to be optimally productive, contrasted with the specific, messy reality of pulling all-nighters until 3 a.m. We examined the desire to stand out versus the strategic choice to use muted colors to blend in.
Think about your own daily life and the language you choose to describe it. Are you using these linguistic strategies, advanced grammar, specific contextual details, vivid vocabulary to only present the simplified, idealized version of your life? Or are you using these techniques to capture the complicated, authentic reality of it?
And which one, in the end, tells a more compelling and sophisticated story? That's something to mull over until our next deep dive.
Okay, welcome back to the deep dive, where we take a massive stack of articles, research papers, and notes, and we distill it down into the most potent, most essential knowledge you need to be immediately well-informed. Today, we're embarking on a bit of a linguistic adventure. We've gone through a huge pile of material focused entirely on the vibrant, dynamic, and sometimes chaotic reality of everyday life in Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon, Vietnam.
That's right. And our mission isn't just to understand what life is like on the ground. It's about how to describe it with precision and, a bit of flair. We're filtering these core urban realities, from the stray dogs on the street to the intense tropical rain, through a very specific linguistic lens. We are here to extract the tools that help you articulate these complex experiences using, well, advanced English vocabulary, idioms, and some key grammatical structures.
Yeah, this is a deep dive that's specifically tailored for you, the learner, who wants to speak like an expert, who understands not just the facts, but the nuance behind them. Our source material gives us 4 core, distinct themes that really shape urban life there. Animals and how we coexist with them, the apps that are, completely indispensable to the daily routine, the music that provides a necessary escape, and finally, the powerful tropical weather that fundamentally dictates everything else.
Exactly. The goal, listener, is to move beyond just basic summaries. We want you to internalize the context of HCMC across these 4 pillars and, at the same time, extract those really effective linguistic tools. Things like the confusing word pairs, the advanced collocations, and the local adaptations that turn a simple description into, a visceral understanding.
I was fascinated by this material. The level of specificity is just incredible. Okay, let's unpack this and start speaking like we live and breathe the city's pulse. Kicking off with Section 1, Animals and Urban Ecosystems, or as we're calling it, the four-legged life. This section immediately shows how economic and social change really dictate our relationship with animals. When we look at the core motivations provided in the sources for keeping pets in HCMC, what immediate social distinctions jump out based on, say, housing type?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the physical environment, the actual architecture of the city, directly dictates why you have an animal. The primary overarching reason for keeping any animal is simply to domesticate it. But when we break down HCMC's landscape, the motivations diverge pretty sharply. They really show 2 distinct socioeconomic realities.
Yep.
For many traditional families living in those ground floor townhouses, particularly in the older districts, the relationship is very traditional and pragmatic. The main driver is practical security. They need their property to be guarded. The pet, almost always a dog, is an essential, noisy part of the home security system. It acts as a deterrent against petty crime.
So pets is protection, a living alarm system. But the city is increasingly defined by vertical growth, by high-rises.
Absolutely. And when you move into the modern apartment towers and high-rise living, which, represent the rising middle class and that rapid urbanization, the reason for pet ownership just flips entirely. For apartment dwellers, and crucially for the elderly who might be isolated, the main reason is pure emotional necessity, companionship.
That distinction is so critical. The sources really emphasize that keeping a pet provides essential company and emotional support. It offers, and this is a quote, a companionship like no other. That speaks to the intensity of urban density coupled with a rising sense of, maybe, isolation.
Precisely. In a city where life is constantly rushing, having that reliable, quiet source of comfort is vital. The sources even detail this concept of the therapeutic effect, the measurable stress relief you get from playing with a pet after a long, stressful day. And that therapeutic effect, it's not a luxury. The sources frame it as a mental necessity for balancing out the nonstop pressure of the urban environment.
And we should upgrade our vocabulary here immediately. I mean, stop just saying pet. The sources suggest using phrases like furry companion or four-legged friend.
Hmm.
It elevates the description from just a noun to, well, a role.
Exactly. And that emotional connection is evident even in the stories of people who were, initially averse to animals.
Right. The source material included a very specific anecdote about a personal evolution regarding dogs, which I found totally relatable to the HCMC environment.
It connects personal history directly to the urban landscape. The speaker noted they used to be terrified of dogs as a child. And why? Because of the number of stray animals wandering the streets in their neighborhood. This links a private fear to a major ongoing public downside of the city: the lack of robust animal control and welfare infrastructure.
But the key is the change, the evolution. The strays scared them, but the domestic dogs eventually grew on me to the point where they're now considered a loyal canine companion. I love that phrase, grew on me. It's perfect for describing how a new city, a new food, or a new type of music, or a dog becomes appealing over time after you were initially resistant.
It's high-frequency conversational English, for sure. Now, while we're focused on the animals we choose to keep as companions, we also have to address the broader, darker reality of the animals we're losing. The discussion about strays leads us directly into the realm of wildlife conservation.
And this transition is important because the sources paint a very stark and frankly upsetting picture. Many indigenous species in Vietnam are on the verge of extinction.
This is where the language of conservation and crisis becomes so critical. The sources provide a sharp analysis of blame, noting that it is, and I quote, "the ordinary people that are to blame for creating demand for wildlife products, particularly for things like traditional medicine or as exotic food items."
Wait, blaming the ordinary consumer, that seems a little simplistic, doesn't it? Does the source material also address things like organized crime or government enforcement issues?
It does focus heavily on the demand side, yes, which is a significant part of the problem, the creation of the market. But you're right, the situation is compounded by massive structural environmental factors driven by urbanization. That consumer demand is only half the crisis.
So what are those structural factors?
Rapid urbanization and intense deforestation. This is the language of environmental destruction. These processes are actively depriving these animals of their natural food sources. The result is that their natural habitat is encroached upon. That phrase, natural habitat encroached upon, is incredibly powerful. It means their home is literally being invaded and reduced by human expansion.
That single phrase is a perfect summary for an extremely complex environmental disaster happening all across Southeast Asia. And for most city dwellers, the only contact they have with the complexity of Vietnamese wildlife is, well, through a screen, like watching a nature documentary. They rarely see these exotic species in the flesh.
Which is why the sources express a desire for conservation efforts beyond the traditional format. They mention a wish for more open sanctuaries beyond just the Saigon Zoo and botanical gardens, places where the public can truly appreciate different breeds in their natural habitat. Seeing them in the flesh provides a completely different emotional understanding than just, watching an image.
Before we move on to Section 2, we have to solidify the linguistic toolkit provided here. The sources include several confusing word pairs that are absolutely essential for clarity, especially when you're discussing nuanced topics like conservation policy or urban economics.
Okay, let's nail these down. Let's start with the foundational pairs. First, beside versus spied. Beside just means next to, physically adjacent. I stood beside the dog kennel. Simple.
And besides.
Besides means in addition to or moreover. We have 3 dogs at home, besides which we also have 2 cats. It's simple, but misusing it instantly confuses the meaning.
Okay, second foundational pair, avoid versus prevent.
Right. So avoid means to stay away from something or someone entirely. You make a choice. We avoided that street because of the flooding. Prevent means to stop something from happening or making it impossible. The new barrier was installed to prevent the area from flooding again.
That clarity is everything. Now for the advanced pairs, these are the ones that really signal a high level of proficiency when you're discussing policy and business in Vietnam.
Let's tackle the size versus meaning pair, substantive versus substantial. Substantial is about quantity, a large amount. The rescue center needs a substantial amount of money to operate this year.
And so
Substantive means meaningful, important, or real. It describes the depth of the change. We hope the government makes a substantive reform to the animal welfare laws, not just a minor tweak. You have to use them accurately. A reform can be substantive, so meaningful but not substantial or large, and vice versa. The distinction is really key to high-level analysis.
And the economic pair, which trips up native and non-native speakers constantly? Economic versus economical.
This is a favorite. Economic refers strictly to the system of trade, industry, and finance, the macro picture. You discuss the country's economic growth, economic policy, or the economic impact of wildlife crime.
And economical.
Economical means cheap, cost-saving, or efficient. It relates to personal or corporate frugality. For example, the new electric motorbike is a very economical way to commute.
So, to put it into a scenario,
Mm-hmm.
if the government introduces a new economic policy to promote energy efficiency, you'd hope that policy results in economical choices for consumers, like, say, lower energy bills.
That is the perfect distinction. It shows you can discuss both macro systems and personal budget choices. And finally, just wrapping up the local detail here, the sources mention this growing trend of pet-friendly establishments in areas like District 2. It reflects the growing wealth and that changing relationship with pets we discussed earlier, moving them from guards to companions, fully integrated into the leisure lifestyle.
A perfect pivot point. That integration really only happens because technology allows us to navigate the city. Let's move to Section 2.
Let's shift gears now into Section 2, apps and the digital transformation, or the tech-savvy life. The sources immediately establish technology use in Saigon as pervasive. It's ubiquitous and inevitable. You simply cannot function without it.
That's the reality of modern HCMC. And when we talked about digital dependency, the sources capture the common struggle perfectly, being guilty of having more apps than I know what to do with. That's Christine. Daily reliance on social media, Zalo for local communication, Facebook for broader work and personal connection, it's mandatory for simply operating.
And this reliance fosters these extreme habits that have become linguistic staples of our time. We become glued to the screen. We check our phones the moment we wake up. But the worst habit the sources identify is doom scrolling.
Let's spend a moment on doom scrolling. It's a relatively new word, but it's instantly recognizable.
It's the act of, aimlessly viewing social media or news feeds, often focusing primarily on negative, depressing, or infuriating news. And it gets to the point where it's actually detrimental to your mental health. In HCMC, this is amplified by the pressure to maintain professional appearances or keep up with rapid societal changes on platforms like Zalo and Facebook. That pressure drives constant checking, and when the news is bad, you get stuck in that scroll cycle. It's an unavoidable downside of technological ubiquity.
And the necessary countermeasure to being glued to the screen is this desire for a digital detox. The sources note this is particularly sought on weekends, especially when notifications are driving you insane. It's this intense reliance where the phone is essential for work, followed by a necessary, if often failed, attempt at total disconnection just to preserve your sanity.
That tension between the need to connect for commerce and the mental burnout from constant pings is truly the definitive feature of modern urban life everywhere. The digital environment of Vietnam is just so densely connected that the pings are louder, the reliance is heavier, and the burnout risk is, it's higher.
No, let's address a generational stereotype that the sources debunk beautifully. This idea that the older generation is often perceived as being technophobes.
This stereotype is challenged directly with real-world observation. The sources state, contrary to popular belief, many seniors in Vietnam are actually incredibly tech-savvy. You see them mastering tablets for reading news or video calling their grandchildren overseas via Zalo with ease. Technology is no longer an insurmountable barrier based purely on age. It's about adaptation speed, not generation.
That reframing requires us to be really precise in our language. The sources give us another set of adjective suffixes to master, historic versus historical, and classic versus classical. These are essential when you're discussing these generational and technological shifts accurately.
Let's clarify. So, historic means profoundly important or famous in history. It changed the course of events. For example, the widespread adoption of Zalo by seniors is a historic shift in social and communication behavior in Vietnam.
And historical.
Historical simply means related to the past. You might conduct historical research into how people communicated 20 years ago, but the research itself isn't necessarily a historic event.
Okay, that makes sense. One denotes significance. The other denotes simply a temporal connection to the past. What about the classic versus classical pair?
Right. Classic means typical, timeless, or excellent, a standard of high quality. We might call the original design of the Grab app a classic piece of functionalism. Classical refers to a traditional style, often relating to formalized Western art, literature, or Music classical architecture, classical music. You wouldn't call a modern app classical. Understanding these nuances, it just elevates your descriptive power enormously and shows you understand the subject matter beyond a simple definition.
Moving back to utility, the sources highlight local adaptation beautifully, noting that Vietnamese people are indeed a tech-savvy bunch.
Yeah.
And the ultimate indispensable example of this adaptation has to be Grab.
Grab is the perfect HCMC case study. It's described as indispensable as a ride-hailing and food delivery app. It's similar to Uber, but adapted perfectly for local needs, especially the dense, high-frequency motorbike culture. It represents the ultimate convenience.
Let's really drill into that idea of ultimate convenience. In a high-density, rapidly growing urban environment, the ability to summon a motorbike taxi or food delivery instantly, especially when the weather is so unpredictable, is transformative.
It solves constant environmental and logistical problems. I mean, imagine a sudden torrential rainstorm hitting HCMC, which we'll get to in detail later. Before Grab, you were just stuck. Now, for a minimal fee, you can order a driver to deliver dinner or ferry you across town. It doesn't just augment life, it acts as a survival mechanism in adverse conditions.
And the economic impact is massive, moving way beyond just transport. Apps like Momo and Zalo Pay are accelerating Vietnam towards a cashless society. The ease of transaction removes another layer of friction from daily commerce, integrating technology into every financial moment, from buying street food to paying your utilities.
And on a professional level, the sources highlight how apps like Notion are used to streamline my workflow. This phrase is vital for business English. To streamline means to make a working process smoother, faster, and more efficient. It's all about productivity and meeting deadlines in a high-pressure urban economy.
So whether it's a personal convenience or a professional necessity, the current trend is really clear. Apps are developed to augment every real-life experience, to enhance or supplement what we already do, making the difficult parts of urban life, well, tolerable.
And this leads naturally to future speculation and the concept of the super app. The sources suggest it wouldn't be far-fetched to envision a super app that controls every single aspect of life. This is the ultimate dream of digital integration.
Describe that future app.
It's the maximum integration scenario. A single interface managing your smart home devices, paying all your bills, tracking your health metrics, and even tracking your carbon footprint. All of your digital identity and your physical life unified on one seamless platform. It speaks to a profound belief that technology can and should organize the complexity of modern life.
A completely augmented reality, run by a single platform. If that vision of total digital control doesn't make you crave that weekend digital detox, I don't know what will. It says a lot about the double-edged sword of ubiquity. Now we transition to Section 3, Music and Emotional Resonance, or the Sonic Life. If apps help organize the physical and digital chaos of HCMC, music provides the necessary psychological counterbalance. In an intense urban environment, music moves from being just entertainment to being a cultural and personal necessity.
Absolutely. The sources confirm this high affinity, noting, I'm a huge fan, but the analysis moves quickly beyond just preference to its core function. Its emotional purpose is to provide respite and a critical escape from the chaos of life.
That sentiment, the source acknowledges, might sound like a cliche. But if you've ever stood on a busy street corner in HCMC, you understand that the constant, overwhelming din of motorbikes, horns, and generators, it just mandates a psychological shield. Headphones become the only effective boundary against that constant noise pollution.
It's a powerful dynamic. You use technology, your phone, noise-canceling headphones, to impose quiet and order over the physical sensory overload of the city. That personal soundtrack becomes essential for emotional survival. Music can genuinely evoke strong emotions and provide psychological balance.
So let's look at how personal taste evolves within this environment. The speaker's preference is described as eclectic, a wonderful word that means deriving ideas, style, or taste from a broad and diverse range of sources.
And their history confirms this range. They used to be a total metalhead in high school. This is the perfect linguistic moment to highlight a core English grammar distinction using used to plus V correctly. It denotes a past habit or state that no longer happens. I used to listen to metal implies you don't really listen to it now. It shows change over time, and it's a highly useful conversational structure.
And the current trend reflects the high-energy reality of the city's nightlife scene. Lately, they have jumped on the EDM bandwagon.
That idiom, jump on the bandwagon, is crucial. It means to join a popular activity or trend that has already started, often because it's fashionable or socially prevalent. EDM, electronic dance music, is massive in HCMC nightlife, making this a culturally relevant example of the idiom. And again, like the dogs, the music grew on me after an initial dislike.
Beyond the intense high-engagement genres, music serves more utilitarian functions. The sources mention putting on lo-fi beats as background noise while studying or working.
This is a different function entirely. It's not about emotional engagement, it's about regulating the environment. Lo-fi creates a neutral sonic field, a steady, predictable rhythm that drowns out the disruptive noise of the city. It's conducive to focus. It's like sonic architecture for concentration.
And then there's V-pop, which provides the auditory equivalent of an inescapable thought,
Hmm.
an earworm. That is the perfect term for a melody or song that gets stuck in your head and you just hum it all day long.
I swear I spent an entire Grab ride humming one of those inescapable V-pop hits yesterday. It's truly fascinating how locally popular music penetrates daily thought processes and becomes a shared, often involuntary, mental soundtrack for the city.
Shifting to instruments, the guitar example is very interesting. The speaker's been playing for about 10 years. But the initial motivation wasn't necessarily a deep love of classical music. It was the rebellious allure of guitarists.
That youthful aspiration, seeking a certain identity or image, is a strong motivator for learning any instrument. But in the HCMC context, the instrument quickly becomes socialized. It's cited as a great way to bond with friends during casual rooftop parties. The guitar facilitates immediate, tangible social connection in a dense urban environment where finding space for quality social interaction can be a challenge.
And while EDM and guitar parties define the present, there is a deep reservoir of nostalgia that music taps into. Listening to old Trinh Quang Sun songs, the iconic Vietnamese composer, provides a nostalgic vibe that reminds one of old Saigon.
Nostalgia is often amplified in rapidly changing cities. When the physical landmarks are constantly being torn down and rebuilt, when the pace of change is just dizzying, listening to the music of the past provides a vital, stabilizing link to a world that is emotionally and physically disappearing. It's a moment of emotional anchoring.
And the local scene supports quieter forms of enjoyment, too. The sources note the popularity of acoustic sessions in cafes, particularly in District 3, on Friday nights. This shows a demand for intimate, low-key, live musical experiences away from the loud club environment. It's another form of respite.
And let's not overlook the simple high-frequency idiom, music to my ears, which just means hearing good news. Hearing the boss cancel the morning meeting, music to my ears. It's a wonderful piece of figurative language to keep handy.
Before we move to the final section, a quick practical linguistic tool, the advice on reading numbers in estimation.
Yes. For numbers, especially years, we need to read them naturally to sound fluid. 1995 is 1995. But perhaps more practically, when you're estimating quantities or time, like how long you've played guitar or how long a commute will take, avoid guessing precisely. Use tools like roughly, approximately, or somewhere in the neighborhood of. It makes your speech sound much more natural and conversational than a precise academic delivery. Our final major theme is perhaps the most powerful force shaping daily existence in HCMC: the weather and adaptation, or the tropical life. This isn't background noise, this is the physical reality that dictates everything else.
This is fundamental context that just cannot be overstated. Vietnam is tropical and the South is hot year-round. But the sources immediately inject a modern urgency by linking it to climate change. Due to global warming, the heat has become far more intense recently in the previous decades.
The consequences are dire and immediate, moving from discomfort to genuine risk. The sources cite reports of people becoming seriously dehydrated in 40-degree heat during the peak dry season, often from simply commuting or working outdoors. This intensity is a life-threatening reality that dictates when you go out, what you wear, and how you schedule your entire day.
And crucially, it is not just the temperature itself. The sources detail that it is the stifling humidity that truly drains your energy. Stifling is the perfect adjective here. It implies breathlessness, oppression, and a heavy physical feeling of the air. We're cautioned against going out at noon because it is scorching hot or boiling hot. This sensory descriptive vocabulary is vital because it paints a picture far beyond just it's hot.
Scorching or boiling hot, yeah, they vividly convey the oppressive intensity. The weather is not an abstract concept. It is a heavy physical presence that must be managed minute by minute through constant adaptation. It really slows down the pace of life in the middle of the day.
This reality means HCMC doesn't follow the typical four-season calendar we might expect in temperate zones. The crucial local note is that Saigon does not have a true autumn or a winter. It has a dry season and a rainy season.
And understanding those cycles is mandatory for survival. The dry season runs roughly from December to April, characterized by that intense climbing heat and low rainfall. The rainy season runs from May to November, defined by high humidity and torrential afternoon showers.
And the sources identify a favorite time within this cycle, the transitional period leading up to Tet, usually in December or January.
This period is a brief, climatic reprieve. It's celebrated precisely because it brings a pleasant drop in humidity and a sense of crisp morning air. It is the moment of environmental comfort that everyone looks forward to before the intense dry season heat really kicks in.
And this weather shift has a strong cultural observation tied to it, linking the climate to festivity. The city center, specifically the famous Nguyen Hue walking street, transforms with flower decorations during this brief, pleasant period.
It is truly a sight to behold. This transitional period is the backdrop for the Tet holiday preparations and is celebrated exactly because of the temporary, bearable climate it provides, which is why it has such a strong sense of holiday festivity and shared community attached to it. It's a communal sigh of relief.
Now let's talk about the absolute power of this weather over daily routines. The impact on planning is absolute. Unfavorable weather, which could mean a 40-degree midday sun or an intense downpour, means plans have to be canceled or severely altered. This is not a matter of choice. It's mandatory adaptation.
And this deeply affects fashion. The heat dictates clothing choices, requiring breathable fabrics like cotton and linen. The sources explicitly mention avoiding layering up, a sharp contrast with regions that experience cold, and prioritizing quick-drying materials, anticipating getting caught in a downpour.
Speaking of downpours, let's address the monsoon challenges. The rain is incredibly frequent in the rainy season. It often rains like clockwork around 4 p.m. It is predictable in its daily intensity, so much so that people often schedule naps or errands around it.
But predictability doesn't equate to mildness. Those sudden downpours lead to dramatic, challenging conditions. If you're commuting, you risk being caught in a downpour while riding a motorbike. Worse, the flat topography combined with rapid urbanization means these downpours cause immediate, intense flooding.
And that's where the vocabulary gets visceral. What does that flooding look like for a commuter?
It leads to situations where one must wade through floodwaters to get home. That phrase, wade through floodwaters, captures the sheer effort, the danger, and the reality of a simple commute being turned into an ordeal. The water can be knee-deep, sometimes higher, requiring careful navigation through crowded, flooded streets. This vocabulary really captures the physical struggle imposed by the environment.
This section also includes valuable structural advice that helps us describe these events accurately. First, ensuring proper subject-verb agreement.
An absolute necessity for grammatical accuracy, especially when describing environmental effects. The subject of the sentence has to match the verb form. Remember that singular nouns require a singular verb. So, the stifling humidity drains my energy, not the stifling humidity drained my energy, or the sudden downpour affects my mood.
And the strategic use of the passive voice, especially when describing widespread issues like flooding or traffic.
The passive voice is strategically useful here because it allows you to shift focus from the agent, the rain or the sun, to the subject being affected, which is often the person or the infrastructure. For example, instead of saying heavy rain flooded the streets, which is active, you can use the passive voice. The streets are flooded by the heavy rain, or my daily commute is affected by the weather. This is often a more powerful way to emphasize the impact on the individual or the infrastructure.
And despite all the scorching heat, the stifling humidity, and the necessary waiting, there are still moments of simple, natural pleasure.
Yes, the conclusion of the weather experience, finding a welcome breeze when you're sitting by the Saigon River in the evening. It's a sensory relief that punctuates the hard day and a pleasant, natural ventilation in what is otherwise a concrete, dense, urban jungle. It's the moment the city lets you breathe.
What an incredible journey through the realities of HCMC. We've gone from four-legged companions as a necessity to the concept of the super app that organizes our lives, from EDM bandwagons providing sonic respite to the necessity of wading through floodwaters.
Our summary shows how crucial these specific vocabulary nuggets are. They allow you to move past simple description and speak with authority. Knowing the difference between substantive and substantial helps you discuss conservation funding versus the meaningfulness of wildlife laws. Distinguishing between technophobe and tech-savvy reframes generational understanding based on real observation.
And using terms like stifling humidity or scorching hot, moves your language from simple description to visceral reality. We've clarified the distinctions between conservation issues, generational technology gaps, and the harsh realities of a tropical climate.
The linguistic nuance clarifies exactly what is happening on the ground, the difference between being beside the problem and solving it besides dealing with other issues. The most valuable knowledge, as we've seen, isn't general. It is localized, precise, and immediately applicable to the HCMC experience. The power is in the precision.
So whether you're managing a professional project and need to streamline your workflow, or you're caught in a sudden downpour and have to start wading through floodwaters, you now have the detailed language to perfectly match the complexity of the experience.
And this leads us to our final thought for you to chew on. We explored the speculative future of the digital world where the super app might consolidate and control every single aspect of life, from smart devices to carbon tracking. This is the ultimate tool for organizing and controlling the external world.
Right, the maximum integration, demanding constant adaptation from us.
The sources show that whether you're dealing with the physical environment like scorching heat or the digital environment like doom scrolling, modern life demands constant adaptation and sophisticated tools. So if the definition of a super app is to control every aspect of life, what is the equivalent linguistic tool, the ultimate phrase or idiom that could encapsulate the sheer complexity of living a modern globalized life, demanding these multiple modes of survival, from technological dependence to physical adaptation? What single phrase acts as the linguistic super app?
That is the perfect question to mull over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Today, we're not just diving into random information. We're diving deep into the architecture of language itself. Specifically, how to describe the most common, everyday things, the food on your plate, the way you travel, the parks you visit, and the people in your life.
Right. That's stuff we talk about all the time.
Exactly. And our sources today, they provide this phenomenal blueprint showing us how to use rich vocabulary and complex structures to really elevate that conversation.
That's exactly right. And our mission today is really custom tailored for you, the learner. We are trying to demonstrate through these examples how to take a discussion from just a basic summary, what might be, a satisfactory answer.
Passing grade.
A passing grade, exactly. And turn it into a genuinely masterful level of analysis. We are going to meticulously pull out the core linguistic moves, the powerful contrast strategies, and the vocabulary that just it. It turns a simple description into a profound statement.
What immediately jumps out at me from this material is that deliberate strategy of using contrast and emotional depth. It's not enough to describe a meal, in isolation. The highest level of communication, it seems, forces us to compare it against its opposite.
The high end versus the lowbrow.
High end versus lowbrow, convenience versus anxiety, reality versus aspiration. And that difference, it fundamentally changes how we communicate about the world.
It creates texture. That's what it does.
Yeah.
When you introduce that friction through contrast, you force the listener to think more critically. It signals that you, the speaker, understand the full spectrum of an experience, not just the surface-level facts.
And we have structured this deep dive perfectly to guide you through that exact process. We've got 4 great sections lined up. We're starting with the literal plate in front of us. We're calling it the culinary conversation. Then we're moving on to aspirations and travel with nautical insights, confronting urban reality in the urban oasis, and then finally we'll conclude with the depth and complexity of our relationships in the art of connection.
It's a great lineup.
Let's jump in and start upgrading that language immediately. So we begin with food. It is universally enjoyable, universally discussed, and yet it's often the subject of the most basic, kind of simplistic language.
Absolutely.
We all say, that was good, or I like that place. But our sources provide these immediate, actionable steps to upgrade that, starting with, well, the very foundation of clear speech.
We have to start there. It's the foundational clarity. The absolute essential is the clear pronunciation of ending sounds. We're specifically talking about those really subtle consonant sounds that indicate plurals or tense, the S, Z, and is sounds.
Like in noodles, restaurants, likes.
Exactly those.
Okay, so it sounds elementary, but why is this so critical? I mean, if someone understands... a restaurants, even if I kind of drop the is sound, what's the real harm?
Well, the harm is in perception and precision. If you consistently drop those subtle consonant endings, you sound a bit imprecise, maybe rushed, or less attentive to detail.
Okay.
High-level communication requires you to convey confidence and mastery over the language's internal rules. And mastering those slight plural endings, it's really the first step in signaling that linguistic precision to your listener. It's a sign of respect for the structure of the language.
That makes a lot of sense. It's the difference between sounding just conversational and sounding, academic or authoritative. That precision is the upgrade.
It is.
And once you've nailed that clarity, the next structural move is the shift towards the passive voice.
This is the next level of, I'd say, structural elegance. Instead of relying on this simple, active voice, the cook served the noodles with fresh herbs, you use more objective language.
So how does that sound in practice?
The examples are perfect. It is served with fresh herbs, or it is made from rice flour. This structural shift, it moves the conversation away from the person in the kitchen and puts it squarely on the plate itself.
So instead of focusing on who did the action, we focus on the subject, the food.
Precisely. It creates this formal, objective, almost journalistic distance. You're describing the inherent qualities of the dish, independent of who prepared it. It creates authority because you sound like you're analyzing it, not just reporting on one meal you had.
But doesn't using the passive voice, doesn't it sometimes strip the human element out of food? Which is, such a personal, emotional topic.
That's a really thoughtful challenge. And yes, it can. It certainly removes the chef from the sentence, but what it does is it elevates the food itself to the status of an artifact. Something worthy of this kind of deep analysis.
I see.
So if you're comparing different cuisines, for example, using the passive voice helps you maintain a really objective tone. It's a tool for critical analysis, used when the what is more important than the who.
Okay, now that we have the structural tools, we get to the highest level, the 9.0 strategy, the strategic use of contrast and powerful idioms. And the contrast here is fantastic, comparing high-end dining with low-brow, casual street food.
This contrast is the absolute heart of a sophisticated culinary discussion.
Okay.
High-end dining, it immediately conjures images of white tablecloths, subtle presentation, reservations.
A big bill.
A very big bill. And then lowbrow street food, it speaks to speed, authenticity, local flavor, immersion. And it's described here as being quintessential to Saigon culture. You're not just describing two different meals. You're analyzing two different socioeconomic and cultural experiences.
And to ground this, the sources give us a phenomenal specific example, right, from Ho Chi Minh City culture, Pho La, in District 5. They highlight that it's an absolute institution in Saigon.
An institution. I love that word choice.
And that its broth is simply to die for.
Okay, let's break that down. Notice the incredible power packed into that short phrase. Institution is so much more than just a popular restaurant. It implies longevity, cultural status, community identity.
Right. It's like it's part of the city's fabric.
Exactly. It suggests that eating there is participating in a shared history. You're saying this place is a fixture, a cornerstone.
And right after establishing that cultural weight, you hit them with the idiom, to die for, which is the ultimate, almost hyperbolic expression of sensory pleasure.
It's not just delicious.
No. It's worth any risk or sacrifice.
Precisely. You've moved from simply reporting the soup is famous and tastes great, to analyzing its cultural significance, and then following that with this intense emotional evaluation of its quality. That contrast, the formality of institution followed by the enthusiastic informality of to die for, it's highly engaging. You are reporting and analyzing at the same time.
But then the discussion on food preferences immediately pivots from sensory pleasure to something deeper, this personal concern about food, safety, and peace of mind.
Yeah.
The source explicitly links the preference for home cooking directly to having peace of mind and being health conscious.
This is that critical urban tension we talked about. The deliciousness of full sail is intoxicating, sure, but urban life, especially in a dense metropolis, it forces many people to prioritize control over convenience. The source explicitly mentions that in an environment like HCMC, food safety can be an issue.
So the choice to cook at home isn't a reflection of a poor economy or a lack of options. It's an active decision to mitigate risk.
It is risk management, plain and simple. Home cooking allows you to control the ingredients, the oil, the salt, the hygiene standards. That control provides a profound psychological benefit peace of mind that eating out, no matter how popular the place is, it just can't provide.
It's an insight that turns a simple preference into a serious discussion about personal agency and urban anxiety.
Yes, and that connection makes your response so much more relevant to anyone living in a high-density environment. You're linking gastronomy to psychology.
That deepens the conversation so much. It shows you acknowledge the subtext of urban living. Now let's pivot entirely. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum and talk about the linguistic power of negativity.
Ah, yes.
The vocabulary of disgust, specifically relating to a dish described as the abomination.
This is a fantastic lesson in using linguistic register. The speaker starts by establishing their credibility, right? They clarify. They are not a picky eater and are usually up for trying weird, funky things.
So they're setting the stage. They're saying, I'm adventurous, so when I reject something, that rejection carries some serious weight.
Maximum impact. And the rejected dish is bun dao mam tom. The components, noodles, tofu, veggies, they're all pretty standard. The entire crisis point is the famous Vietnamese fermented shrimp paste sauce, mam tom.
Right.
And this is where that register shift happens. The mam tom sauce is labeled an abomination. Just think about that word for a second.
It's biblical.
It is. It's a moral or religious term, something utterly repulsive, profane, unnatural. To use it for a food product signals that the sensory violation is total.
Why not just say, it smells bad or it's disgusting? Why use a word with such extreme, almost moral weight?
Because the simple words just don't capture the visceral reaction. They state it grosses me out due to its foul smell, and the source even suggests the smell makes you want to throw up. Abomination perfectly matches that intensity. It tells the listener, this is beyond mere unpleasantness. It violates the very standard of what food should be.
Wow.
Using that strong adjective shows a high command of register and the ability to find the single powerful word necessary to convey a deeply felt emotion. That strength of feeling is memorable.
I think we need a moment to process the idea of an abomination on a plate. That's not just bad, that's a violation.
And that's the goal of high-level communication, leaving an indelible impression.
Okay, moving beyond specific dishes, the sources are rich with what they call Saigon food culture vocabulary.
Right.
Every learner should really absorb these to sound fluent and local.
Absolutely. Let's highlight three. First, we have a hole in the wall.
A class.
It is. It's a beautifully descriptive idiom for a small, often unassuming, maybe even run-down eatery. And crucially, the source notes these often have the best food citing the banh mi shops in District 3 as a prime example.
It captures that sense of a hidden treasure. You're communicating that the lack of aesthetic polish is, inversely correlated with the quality of the food. It's an insider term.
It is. It conveys authenticity. Next, we have street food haven, used to describe HCMC itself. A haven is a place of refuge, safety, abundance. By labeling the city this way, you're summarizing the entire culinary landscape. It's a paradise for street food lovers.
That's so much better than just saying a really good street food city. It gives the city this welcoming, almost mythological status.
And finally, the ultimate descriptive term for the essential Vietnamese street dining experience, plastic stool dining.
I can picture it perfectly.
It isn't just a label. It captures a specific cultural ritual eating low to the ground on those little plastic stools, often crowded together on the sidewalk. It is shorthand for immersion, informality, and authenticity.
By using terms like hole in the wall and plastic stool dining, you're demonstrating cultural fluency. You're not just describing food, you're describing the setting and the social conventions that go with it.
This is vital. A sophisticated speaker provides cultural context, not just observation.
We wrap up this culinary section with the aftermath and comfort. Once the intense flavor experience is over, we need the vocabulary to describe the lasting feeling.
The first phrase is essential for discussing anything complex or challenging. An acquired taste. The classic example provided is durian because of its pungent smell. This phrase acknowledges that something is difficult at first, but suggests that perseverance will be rewarded.
It's a polite way of saying, I didn't like it at first.
Exactly. It maintains an open mind. And then we have the physical reality after a massive, wonderful meal. The food coma.
We've all been there.
It's a lighthearted idiom that perfectly captures that post-meal condition of being overwhelmingly full and sleepy. It's an instant relatable image. After that massive bowl of pho, as the source suggests, I slipped into a serious food coma.
And finally, the nostalgic layer. Comfort food.
This is typically a dish associated with home, childhood, or a profound sense of safety. The source gives com tam, or broken rice, as an example, noting it's the ultimate comfort food when you're feeling down.
This brings us full circle. Comfort food ties back so neatly to the earlier discussion about peace of mind. It provides not just physical nourishment, but emotional security.
Absolutely. It's the antithesis of that urban food anxiety. So, in summary for food, We've learned how to move from precise pronunciation to objective analysis using the passive voice, and then deployed phrases like abomination and institution, all while structuring our thoughts around sophisticated contrasts. That's a comprehensive level up.
Time to step away from the kitchen and onto the water. Our second deep dive focuses on boats and water travel. And this is where we see language used to structure ideas about time, luxury, and perspective. And as always, we start with the grammatical essentials.
The foundational linguistic move here is mastering relative clauses. These are just indispensable for extending sentences and providing necessary context without having, choppy, simplistic statements. You use who, which, where to link ideas smoothly.
So it's a tool for preventing a disjointed response.
Precisely. The example from the source is perfect for this. The Saigon River, which runs through the city center, is beautiful at night. That relative clause, which runs through the city center, it serves two immediate purposes. It clarifies the subject for someone who might not know, and it elegantly adds descriptive detail in a single coherent stream.
So if you're trying to describe something new or local, using a relative clause ensures you don't lose your audience.
It manages complexity effectively. You give the proper name, then the context, ensuring your listener is right there with you before you get to your main point, that it's beautiful at night.
And moving up to the next level of structural elegance, we tackle time expressions. The idea is to move past simple words like before or later.
Yes. The material provides three excellent replacements that instantly elevate the register. We have way back when.
Which has a nice nostalgic feel.
It does. Then, in the foreseeable future, which is much more formal, and simply someday, which frames a hopeful aspiration.
Using these adds deliberation and precision. You can talk about a childhood trip by saying, way back when I went to Ha Long Bay, and it instantly sets a temporal distance that feels more deliberate than just a long time ago.
And the foreseeable future is crucial in professional contexts. It suggests a time frame that is near enough to plan for, but not immediate. It shows precision.
That deliberate framing of time leads us directly into the 9.0 strategy, which focuses on luxury vocabulary and context, contrasting the functional reality of boats with the aspirational dream.
When discussing boats, especially in a modern context, you have to engage with the cultural connotations of wealth and leisure. This is where terms like posh, splurge, and even debauchery come into play.
Let's talk about that stark difference between the reality versus the dream. The reality, especially in a city like HCMC, is functional, taking the Saigon water bus to avoid that crippling road traffic.
Right.
The source is clear that the vast majority of boats in Vietnam are not pleasure crafts.
And that contextual note grounds the conversation in local infrastructure and economics. The discussion starts practical water transport as a pragmatic solution before we let ourselves drift into aspiration.
And the dream, of course, is the luxury yacht. The source highlights this fantastic, slightly cynical phrase, nothing says class-like, and then it openly acknowledges the association with a debauchery lifestyle.
This is where we show a nuanced perspective. The speaker is demonstrating awareness of the social stereotype, that luxury yachts are often tied to excessive, even immoral, indulgence debauchery.
But wait, isn't that just a bit of class envy? I mean, are we as sophisticated communicators really just reinforcing a tired stereotype by immediately connecting a luxury item with debauchery?
That's a really sharp point. But the linguistic power here lies in acknowledging that the stereotype exists. By using a strong, provocative word like debauchery, the speaker shows they are aware of the social baggage that comes with extreme wealth symbols.
Ah, I see.
If you try to use a neutral term like expensive, you lose that critical social context. The speaker isn't endorsing the lifestyle, but they're reporting that the language around it is charged. High-level speakers know how to handle charged language without taking a side.
So it's a demonstration that we understand the depth of the perception surrounding the asset.
Precisely. It's demonstrating awareness of the culture of wealth. And this desire is best encapsulated in the travel anecdote provided. The Ha Long Bay trip, described as a cruise of a lifetime.
Right. They talk about sailing on a posh vessel and having an absolute blast.
Posh vessel immediately implies sophistication and extremely high quality. Combined with cruise of a lifetime, you create a powerful memory marker. It suggests this experience was unique and profoundly memorable.
An absolute blast is a great, strong idiom for intense enjoyment.
The whole anecdote presents the water experience as a literal and psychological escape from the constraints of urban traffic and density.
And speaking of that experience, the source expands on it, acknowledging not just the good, but the physical reality of the trip.
It shows comprehensiveness. The realistic element includes discussing drawbacks like motion sickness or being seasick. A full description of travel has to include potential discomforts.
But then the language introduces depth through idioms like smooth sailing.
Smooth sailing is fantastic because it works both literally and figuratively, making it highly efficient.
A linguistic efficiency tool, I like that.
It is. You can talk about the literal journey being calm, or you can use it figuratively to discuss a life or project that proceeds without difficulty.
And to capture the sheer joy, that sensory description of feeling the wind in my hair evokes such a powerful cinematic image of freedom.
It is a sensory anchor. It grounds the abstract idea of freedom in a physical, memorable sensation.
Finally, we anchor this back in the HCMC context by highlighting specific Saigon water activities. The dim cruise on the Saigon River is mentioned as a popular local activity.
This brings the aspiration back down to an achievable local luxury. It's a sophisticated compromise between the yacht dream and the water bus reality.
And the power of this experience is described as offering a completely different perspective of the city.
That's key. The visual distance changes your perception of the familiar urban landscape. The city you walk through every day suddenly feels grander, more beautiful, because you're removed from the noise of its streets.
It's a psychological shift created by a physical change in vantage point.
Exactly. Viewing the high-rises from the water emphasizes their scale and achievement. It turns the city from a place of stress into a spectacle of light and ambition.
So, boats move us through grammatical context setting, to an analysis of wealth stereotypes, and finally to the sensory and perceptual freedom that water travel offers. A very deep dive indeed. Now, we step off the posh vessel and back into the hustle and bustle, but this time we are looking for the sanctuary within the chaos parks and green spaces. This section focuses heavily on infrastructure, contrast, and scarcity, and how to communicate that reality with precision.
The linguistic foundations here are crucial for structuring an analytical response to an urban problem. The essential point is explaining proper names. When you mention a local landmark, you must give context immediately.
Right. Assume your listener may not be local. The example is Taoidan Park, which is known as the green lung of the city.
That relative clause provides the function and the reputation of the park, not just its location. It ensures clarity, and it also sets the thematic groundwork for your entire discussion. You're immediately defining the park by its critical role in the urban ecosystem.
And the next level of structural elegance focuses on cause and effect, using diverse structures beyond the simple because.
Yes. The source suggests analytical structures like Y is due to X or the reason for Y has been X. This allows for a much more formal and authoritative articulation of urban challenges.
So, for instance, the relative uniformity of the city's green spaces is due to the rapid pace of real estate development.
That is a much stronger structure than just stating the parks are all similar because the city developed fast. It elevates the level of analysis. It sounds like genuine critical thinking.
And that precision leads us directly to the highest level of eloquence, which confronts the local reality head-on using a vocabulary that defines the problem, urban reality and scarcity.
We're talking about the pervasive reality of the concrete jungle, the economic problem of scarcity, and the descriptive term run-of-the-mill.
These terms immediately set a slightly critical, realistic tone. Concrete jungle is such an evocative metaphor.
It is. And scarcity is a powerful, formal economic term applied to physical space. The speaker acknowledges the local truth. HCMC only has a handful of public gardens, which, and here's the critical contrast, leave a little to be desired.
And that most of them are run-of-the-mill.
Run-of-the-mill is a perfect idiom for ordinary or average. It contrasts sharply with the aspirational idea of a spectacular urban park. It manages expectations, communicating that variety of flora is limited, and the scarcity of land dictates the functional rather than decorative design.
By combining scarcity and run-of-the-mill, you establish this necessary realistic benchmark. You're not just saying the parks are small, you are commenting on the lack of land and biodiversity.
And that shows a deep understanding of urban development pressures.
This sets up the critical argument for why green spaces are so vital, moving them beyond just being pretty. We analyze why parks are among the most integral urban infrastructures.
Integral is the key word there, meaning essential to the completion or functionality of the whole system. These spaces are not a luxury, they are functional necessities.
I often think of green space as aesthetic relief, but you're suggesting we should view it like a necessary utility, like clean water or a power grid.
Absolutely. The function is critical. They balance the concrete jungle. They mitigate the heat island effect. They provide space for recreation. If we view a park as integral infrastructure, we immediately elevate its importance in the public debate.
Let's talk about the specific vocabulary of function and experience used to describe this necessity. The most powerful metaphor is undoubtedly the green lungs.
The green lungs of the city is perhaps the most efficient, high-level linguistic tool we've encountered today. Lungs filter. By anthropomorphizing the city and giving it this vital breathing component, the phrase immediately communicates the park's function in filtering out dust and pollution.
It transforms the park from a piece of landscape into a life support system that must be protected.
Precisely.
And what about the human connection? The difficulty of trying to commune with nature in a dense metropolis.
Commune is such a deliberate verb choice. It implies a deep, almost spiritual interaction, not just a casual stroll. The speaker is lamenting how hard it is to achieve that deep connection in a manufactured green space surrounded by towers and traffic.
But conversely, they celebrate the simple urban pleasure of people watching.
Which requires no deep communion at all, just observation. It's the low-stakes social engagement that parks provide. You can observe the flow of city life without being directly immersed in its pressures.
Finally, the section wraps up with the crucial role of contrast and emotional escape. Parks provide a literal breath of fresh air.
And the idiom is used in its literal sense here. The physical sensation of clean air is a relief, but the emotional function is perhaps more important. The park acts as a sanctuary to escape the hustle and bustle of Saigon life.
Hustle and bustle perfectly summarizes that constant noise, movement, and pressure.
That contrast highlights the park's psychological benefit as a necessary counterbalance. It allows for a momentary decompression. A sophisticated speaker can articulate not just what the park is, but what essential psychological release it provides.
So we've learned how to frame an urban issue using analytical structures and strong descriptive vocabulary like scarcity and integral, demonstrating that we view parks not as aesthetic touches, but as crucial, often undervalued infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
We come now to our final and perhaps most sensitive topic, relationships. This is where linguistic precision is just paramount because we're dealing with emotional depth and nuance.
For sure.
And as always, we begin with the linguistic foundation.
We're back to pronunciation. This time, ending sounds, specifically hard consonants. You have to clearly pronounce sounds like P-O-D and K at the end of words. The source gives examples, ensuring you say night, not nigh, or thick, not thee.
We stress the importance of S in the food section. Why are these hard consonants equally vital when we're discussing relationships?
Because emotional conversation requires trust and a certain seriousness. If your articulation is poor, if you sound like you are rushing or imprecise, the listener unconsciously assumes the subject matter is casual or unimportant.
Right.
When you're discussing your mother, your father, or your closest friend, precision in your speech conveys respect and sincerity. It makes the conversation feel weightier.
That's a great point. Articulation equals sincerity in this context. Then, the next structural upgrade introduces comparisons. These are absolutely vital for defining the dynamics and quality of relationships.
We need structures that allow us to move past vague statements of liking or, frequency. We use structures like similar to or the same as and much more or less than. These are crucial for the highest level of eloquence, where the goal is to define the quality of relationships.
And the 9.0 strategy focuses squarely on that, quality and emotional depth. The goal is to move beyond simply stating who you see and how often, and instead describe the emotional framework of the connection.
And the key vocabulary here includes confidant, elusive, and reminisce.
A confidant is so much more than a friend.
It is. It is someone you entrust with secrets and your deepest thoughts. It signals an extremely high level of trust and vulnerability. Elusive is a self-deprecating but high-register word for being hard to pin down. And reminisce is a nostalgic and powerful verb for recalling shared memories.
Let's explore friendship dynamics, distance, and connection. The speaker describes themselves as guilty of being a bit elusive and tending to shy away from reunions.
That admission of guilt is a very sophisticated linguistic move. It shows an awareness of a social expectation that they're failing to meet while still defending their preference for smaller, more intimate connections.
So they want to reminisce about school days, but the awkwardness of large gatherings gets in the way.
Exactly. The tension expressed, wanting to connect through nostalgia but avoiding the social friction of reunions, is a very human and sophisticated point that uses precise language to articulate complex social anxiety.
So is being elusive a negative trait, or is the speaker just prioritizing the confidant style relationship over broad socializing?
I think it's the latter. By labeling themselves elusive, they're analyzing their own social architecture. They prioritize depth over volume.
And the sources provide a suite of idioms for describing both high closeness and low reliability, which really help shortcut these descriptions.
For closeness, we have the colorful idiom thick as thieves, meaning extremely close, sharing secrets, and go way back, which signals a relationship that has lasted a very long time.
And on the negative side, we have the contrast of a fair weather friend.
A powerful, highly descriptive term for someone who is only present when things are easy or convenient and who disappears when difficulties arise. It immediately communicates the low quality and low reliability of that connection.
Shifting focus now to family dynamics, we see the power of comparisons fully realized, particularly in defining the roles of the parents.
The mother is instantly identified as the confidant and a good listener. This establishes the relationship as one of emotional support and open communication. It provides a benchmark for intimacy.
And this is immediately contrasted with the traditional Vietnamese father, described as stern and not very open.
Right, resulting in the speaker not connecting with him the same way as the mother.
That comparison is highly effective.
It is. It analyzes the structural barrier. The father's traditional personality dictates the limited nature of the relationship. Using the structure not connecting the same way is much stronger than just saying, I don't talk to my dad much. It's a culturally specific observation articulated through a universally understandable structure.
We finalize this section with family idioms and boundaries, which capture some universal truths.
The universal bond is captured by blood is thicker than water, which emphasizes that familial ties transcend other relationships. But the sources also acknowledge internal dynamics that challenge this ideal.
Like being the black sheep of the family.
Exactly. The member who differs significantly, often negatively, from the rest of the unit, it acknowledges the internal friction that often exists even within that thicker-than-water bond.
And finally, a great phrase for setting professional distance. Keep someone at arm's length.
The source suggests using this to maintain professional boundaries with colleagues. The phrase visually describes the emotional distance you want to maintain.
It's an effective, formal way to communicate a deliberate boundary, ensuring that while you may be friendly, you're not inviting them into that confidant zone.
It communicates that you value professional relationships, but you intentionally shield your personal life from that connection.
We have seen how deliberate language choice, using strong idioms, powerful contrasts, and specific vocabulary like confidant, abomination, and scarcity, systematically transforms these mundane topics into engaging, sophisticated analysis. It's absolutely clear now that high-level communication isn't just about knowing the facts, it's about having the tools to express nuance and depth.
What's really fascinating here, if we connect this to the bigger picture, is how the strategy for achieving eloquence is consistent across all four topics. In every chapter, food, travel, environment, personal relationships, the methodology is the same. Identify the spectrum of experience. Use powerful, often metaphoric, nouns and adjectives to describe the extremes.
Like abomination versus cruise of a lifetime.
Exactly. And then employ complex grammatical structures like the passive voice and relative clauses to present the argument objectively. This systematic approach, it transforms personal experience into observable, analyzable data.
It's a complete linguistic toolbox designed for maximum impact. Let's briefly recap the standout vocabulary sets from the 4 chapters that define this approach, because these are the words you should start integrating immediately.
From the segment on eating, we established the link between choice and psychology with peace of mind, used high-end dining to set the standard for contrast, and defined the extreme negative with the powerful religious term, abomination.
In the chapter on boats, the aspirational vocabulary carried the weight, giving us luxury yacht, the descriptive adjective posh, and that great memory marker, cruise of a lifetime.
Our segment on parks was defined by urban reality and necessary functional language, giving us the metaphor of the concrete jungle, the economic term scarcity of land and flora, and that functional metaphor, the green lungs of the city.
And finally, in relationships, we learn to prioritize quality over frequency, capturing nuance with the roles of the confidant, the self-analysis of being elusive, and the nostalgic act of needing to reminisce.
The takeaway for you is that sophistication isn't about using big words randomly. It's about choosing the precise word that captures the contrast, the depth, or the cultural context you're trying to analyze.
We've seen that high-level communication requires us to describe the world not just as it is, but how it feels and how it contrasts with expectation or the ideal. So we leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over. If you were forced to describe your own life using only the language of contrast, the high-end moments versus the lowbrow realities, the experiences that felt integral versus the ones that were just run-of-the-mill, the moments that gave you peace of mind versus those that felt like an abomination, what new insights about your own everyday choices and preferences would suddenly emerge? Think about that tension between reality and aspiration until the next time we dive deep.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take complex source material and really extract the actionable, context-rich knowledge that can transform you from just a curious observer into a truly well-informed insider.
And today's deep dive is built on a really unusual set of sources. We aren't looking at the usual news reports or, academic journals.
No, not at all.
It's more like a curated masterclass in communication. Think of it as a blueprint showing you exactly how to speak with the highest level of nuance, with real, grounded specificity. And it's all built around the dynamic, high-stakes context of life in Ho Chi Minh City or HCMC.
That's the key synergy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Our source material gives us the structural rules for great communication and the specific, fascinating content to fill those rules. It's like getting the playbook on how to sound smart. And at the same time, you're receiving all these unique local facts that make you actually smart about a specific place. Our mission today is crystal clear. We are extracting the core principles of how specificity, advanced vocabulary, and deep local knowledge can transform simple facts into high-level, credible insights that really resonate.
Well, if you can master the structure and vocabulary provided here, using real institutional names, understanding local issues like traffic or rent, and applying linguistic techniques like hedging, you move so far beyond just reciting memorized facts. You don't just sound knowledgeable, you really become a highly knowledgeable guide to one of the world's most vibrant and frankly complex urban centers.
Exactly. So I think we have to start by understanding the linguistic architecture. The foundation, really, for building genuinely nuanced communication. We'll analyze what makes an observation go from, basic to brilliant.
Right.
Then we're going to apply those strategies across 4 major interconnected themes that really define HCMC life. First, the ambitious environment of work and study.
Then the cultural complexities of home and hometown.
After that, the functional chaos of transportation. And finally, the fierce dynamics of advertisements and consumer behavior in this booming economy. Let's jump straight into the groundwork, which the sources call the foundational level. So our sources start with what they define as the necessary minimum for effective communication. If we forget the technical labels for a second, what's the core principle of this baseline expectation?
The core principle is coherence. It's that simple. The very first piece of advice is actually a negative instruction. You must actively avoid short, choppy sentences.
Right. And this isn't just about literary style, is it?
No, not at all. It's about signaling relationships between ideas. A sentence like, I am a student, I study finance, I like it, forces the listener to do all the cognitive labor. They have to link those facts together themselves.
Yeah, it leaves you thinking, okay, so what? It's just 3 separate pieces of data. What the sources emphasize is the fundamental role of connectors, of linking ideas to create a coherent thought stream.
We're talking about words and phrases like consequently, on the other hand, given that, or even though, things that build bridges between your ideas.
They really act like directional arrows in your conversation, don't they?
They absolutely do. They signal causation or contrast or addition. When you are discussing something as complex as, say, the infrastructural challenges of a university like UEH, you can't just list the problems one by one.
No, that would be completely ineffective.
You need to connect the high student volume to the inadequate classroom size, which then leads to the difficulty in maintaining focus. That logical chain requires cohesive language to transition smoothly.
So cohesion is really the absolute baseline for establishing authority in any subject. Yeah.
I think so. Because a complex idea, just by its nature, requires multiple clauses and linkages to explain it effectively. Without that foundation, your entire message just fractures, no matter how good your individual facts are.
Okay, so once we have that baseline coherence, the sources guide us up to the next level. Let's call it the power of precision. This is where we start turning general observations into really pointed, high-value insights.
And precision is the absolute hallmark of someone who has moved past that surface-level knowledge. They truly understand the internal mechanics of a domain. The sources give us two fantastic, very simple examples that illustrate this upgrade in sophistication.
Okay, let's start with the professional terminology one. I found this really interesting.
Yes, so the sources highlight the importance of replacing a vague and honestly a potentially judgmental term like low-level job
Hmm.
with a specific universally accepted industry term.
Which is entry-level position.
Exactly, entry-level position.
I think that distinction is so critical, and it really separates the amateur from the professional. Low level carries this implicit judgment, maybe about quality or importance or pay.
It sounds dismissive.
It does. But entry level is purely descriptive of a stage. It signals a recognized starting point in a professional pipeline.
Precisely. When you use entry level, you're showing an understanding of the structure of professional progression, of industry terminology. You are signaling that you know this position is a necessary step on the way to climbing the corporate ladder, which, as we'll see, is a clear aspirational goal for the HCMC student profile in our sources.
So that level of precise vocabulary lends immediate credibility to the speaker's grasp of career dynamics.
It really does.
And the second point of precision is even more fundamental. It's a seemingly simple grammar rule that carries immense weight in a professional dialogue. The distinction between job, which is countable, and work, which is uncountable. Why does attention to this basic grammatical structure matter in a high-level conversation?
Well, it matters profoundly because it signals attention to detail. In a high-stakes competitive environment like HCMC banking, where the student in our source aspires to be sloppy language, just reduces your credibility.
Right.
Accurate grammar is less about knowing a technical rule and more about demonstrating professionalism. When you discuss work, the conceptual output, the labor versus a job, the specific position, the contract, you remove ambiguity. You assure the listener that you are meticulous in your communication, which implies you're meticulous in your thinking and your execution.
That makes perfect sense. It's a very subtle signal of authority.
Okay, so if the power of precision is about using the right words, the next level, what the sources call the highest strategy, is advanced contextual insight. This is where we move from what I know to how I think and where I live.
And this moves beyond just simple preference. It's not enough to say, I like my city. You have to explain the nature of the city. Is it challenging? Is it practical? Is it historically rich? And its application to your life and your future.
The real leverage here, the advanced insight, comes from grounding that information in reality. The source explicitly advises using real, specific HCMC institutional names, UEH, RMIT, VNU, HCM. And we can't just drop those acronyms without explaining their weight.
Right. Let's define them for you, the listener.
Yeah.
UEH is the University of Economics Ho Chi Minh City, known as one of Vietnam's top public universities, specializing heavily in business and finance.
And RMIT is the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. It's a foreign-invested, very prestigious institution.
And then there's VNU HCM, which is the Comprehensive Vietnam National University.
Precisely. So if you are a student discussing economics coursework and you can name the exact university UEH where you're learning those theories, you are instantly demonstrating a lived reality within a specific, highly competitive academic system. You're not just reciting generic, abstract facts you read in a textbook somewhere.
It transforms the abstract into the concrete, doesn't it? Saying, I study hard is completely generic. But saying, I study finance at UEH, and the sheer volume of students means the older District 3 campuses struggle to accommodate us. That is a concrete, verifiable, and deeply contextualized statement.
It shows the speaker is truly embedded in the local landscape, and they're capable of critically assessing their environment. For the listener, this is infinitely more credible and memorable because it creates this clear picture of a real place facing real challenges. It grounds the abstract in reality, which is, that's the definition of advanced contextual insight.
Okay, let's look at the final pillar, which I think is arguably the most important intellectual tool here, hedging and balance. The sources identify this technique, speaking with caution, as essential for critical thinking.
When you're dealing with complex information, especially something like societal trends or cultural critiques or economic forecasts, you should never, ever use absolutes. Anyone who claims to know that everyone feels a certain way or that a fact is always true is just signaling a lack of intellectual maturity.
Right. Life, and especially life in a dynamic metropolis like HCMC, is a spectrum.
It is.
So instead of making a declaration like, the traffic is terrible, which is subjective and absolute, you reframe it to show nuance.
You reframe it by using qualifiers, or what we're calling hedging language. So instead of saying, everyone likes motorbikes, you'd use phrases like, people tend to rely heavily on motorbikes, or it appears that chronic congestion necessitates this mode of travel.
Or you might say, the newer areas like Thao typically offer more modern amenities.
Yes, exactly.
Why is that difference so crucial for a listener who wants to be well-informed?
Because using phrases like typically, or it appears that, or it seems that, demonstrates your awareness that facts or opinions might not be universal or constant. You're signaling that you aren't speaking from a position of absolute infallible truth, but from a position of careful, observed synthesis. You're telling the listener, I've observed this pattern, I believe it is broadly true, but I acknowledge the complexity and the possibility of exceptions. That level of critical balance and intellectual humility is what elevates the conversation immediately. It shows real maturity in synthesizing dense information.
Okay, so to quickly synthesize this foundation, we start with basic coherence, just linking sentences. We move to the power of precision, using specific industry terms like entry-level and accurate grammar. Then we leverage advanced contextual insight by naming real places, like UEH. And we cap it all off with critical balance, using that hedging language.
And now that we have the toolbox, let's open up the vibrant reality of Ho Chi Minh City, starting with the economic and academic engine that powers the whole city: work and study.
So the sources immediately take that foundational blueprint and apply it to the work and study theme. And it creates this really impressive profile of an ambitious HCMC student. The speaker doesn't just say, I am a student.
Yeah.
They use the full specificity strategy.
Yeah, they say, I am a junior at the University of Economics, Ho Chi Minh City, UEH, majoring in finance.
It's perfect.
It is. It's a perfect introduction because it instantly places the speaker, spatially, academically, and temporally junior year, at a top-tier institution focused on the city's lifeblood, which is finance. But what truly makes this insightful is the self-reflection that immediately follows, which provides context for that initial choice.
I think the honesty in admitting the initial choice of major was somewhat arbitrarily made is just incredibly relatable. I mean, most people don't find their lifelong passion at 18 years old.
That admission of initial uncertainty is a great communication strategy in itself. It builds trust. But the key is the subsequent transformation. The speaker has grown quite fond of it.
Right.
And the reason is because they find the fast-paced nature of Saigon's financial market particularly fascinating. This connects their academic path directly to the city's identity. Saigon isn't just a place to study, it's this dynamic, living laboratory that fuels their professional interest.
Let's delve deeper into that connection. If HCMC is the engine, how does the coursework actually translate? The speaker focuses on the value of applicability. When they're asked what is appreciated most, the focus is squarely on the practicality of the coursework.
And this is a crucial insight into modern Vietnamese education, particularly in HCMC. In a rapidly developing, fiercely competitive economy, theory for theory's sake just holds less value. The courses that matter most are those that are highly applicable to real-world scenarios.
Can you elaborate on what that practicality looks like in the context of HCMC? What specific market trends or, scenarios would a UEH finance student be analyzing on a day-to-day basis?
Well, they'd be looking at the rapid growth of the consumer market, the huge influx of foreign direct investment, the complexities of the VN Index and the Vietnamese stock market.
Wow, so real-time stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And the dramatic shifts in real estate and infrastructure financing that are happening literally every single year. The curriculum gives them a solid framework for analyzing the dynamic market trends right there on their doorstep.
So the education is directly serving the function of fueling the city's growth.
Yes, and it's positioning the student not just as a learner, but as an active analyst of Vietnam's economic future. This localized utility is everything.
That positions HCMC as a major economic player on the world stage, one that demands a highly practical, fast-paced education. However, the sources wisely don't allow the narrative to become, a purely aspirational puff piece. They introduce a critique.
And that counter-perspective is essential for nuanced communication. It proves the student is critically engaged with their institution and their environment, not just praising it. And the critique focuses specifically on the physical infrastructure that leaves something to be desired.
Let's get specific on these infrastructural challenges because they paint a really vivid picture of this growth versus legacy conflict in the city.
The sources point out that the older campuses, particularly those perhaps in District 3, are not quite up to par. You have to remember, many key educational institutions in HCMC are housed in older, sometimes colonial era or post-reunification buildings. They're often located in historically central, very space-constrained districts.
And what are the direct consequences of that? What does that feel like for a student?
The consequence is that these facilities struggle to accommodate the sheer volume of the student population. I mean, just picture this. HCMC has a massive, youthful, and incredibly ambitious population, all seeking the best education at institutions like UEH.
So you have this huge demand.
A huge demand. And when that demand is funneled into these finite, older physical spaces, you get overcrowding. You get classrooms packed to the rafters, limited study areas, strained facilities. This speaks directly to the sheer scale of the city's growth and the challenge of education demand rapidly outpacing physical capacity. It's a core tension in many, many rapidly developing metropolises.
It's a fascinating trade-off. High academic relevance and this critical mass of talent, but it's constrained by the physical reality of the city. Okay, let's pivot to ambition. We started by defining the present. Now we define the future. The speaker plans to enter the banking sector, specifically targeting a multinational bank in District 1.
In targeting District 1, the historical commercial heart of the city is an immediate signal of high aspiration. It's where you find the towering headquarters of major international and domestic financial institutions. The vocabulary used to describe this ambition is highly competitive and very descriptive.
Let's break down that competitive vocabulary. They express the intent to remain tenacious. What does tenacity imply in this competitive setting?
Tenacity is so much more than just hard work. It's grit. It's persistent determination in the face of inevitable, fierce obstacles. Given the sheer number of graduates from institutions like RMIT, and VNU-HCM, all vying for those few prestigious spots in District 1, the speaker acknowledges that success is not just about competence. It's about competitive endurance. It sets a very powerful tone.
And the goal is explicitly stated: to climb the corporate ladder rapidly. That's a classic idiom. But it signals an intent not just to join the hierarchy, but to accelerate through it.
That pace is key. It speaks to the perceived necessity of fast upward movement in HCMC's meritocratic structure. It really emphasizes vertical ambition. The speaker isn't looking for stability. They're looking for rapid, structured, professional ascent.
And what is the ultimate driver here? The reward that fuels this tenacity and this rapid ascent. The career must be fulfilling, yes, but also lucrative.
That word lucrative is so loaded. The source even provides the colloquial gloss for it, money rolling in. This connects the tenacity and the rapid ascent directly to a clear, high financial reward. This is a very pragmatic, results-oriented worldview.
It is.
The communication strategy here is powerful because it uses this high-stakes competitive vocabulary to define an ambitious future in a fiercely competitive city, clearly articulating the objective, the mindset, and the desired economic result.
But I have to ask, as the listener's skeptical proxy here, we're talking about District 1 finance tenacity, rapid climbing, lucrative rewards. Isn't that also synonymous with intense corporate burnout, grueling hours, and high-stress environments? Does the source material hint at that negative trade-off at all, or is it purely aspirational?
That's an excellent point. And the source remains purely aspirational here, which is instructive in itself. In high-level communication that's designed to present your best self and your clearest ambition, the focus is on the goal and the drive needed to achieve it.
I see.
The acknowledgement of the potential cost, the burnout, the long hours, is implicitly covered by the necessity of being tenacious. You only need tenacity if the path is difficult, but the explicit focus remains on the reward, which is fundamentally tied to the dynamic, high-growth economy of HCMC.
So the work and study section gives us a deeply detailed narrative.
Yeah.
A reflective past, a critically engaged present, and an ambitious, competitively worded future. That's a highly effective way to synthesize knowledge about the local economy and personal goals.
And now we step away from the professional hustle of District 1, and we explore the cultural roots of the speaker, where they call home, and why that definition is far more complex than a simple address.
Moving from the competitive sphere of work to the personal sphere of residence and identity, this home and hometown section is where we find the deepest layer of cultural nuance. If communication is going to be truly advanced, it has to acknowledge these layers.
This is a critical point. In many Western contexts, hometown is simply where you were born and raised. The source material highlights a crucial distinction in Vietnamese culture regarding this term, and it references the concept of Quan.
Okay, let's unpack that cultural nuance.
Yeah.
The speaker confirms they were born and raised physically in HCMC, a true Saigonese resident. But their cultural hometown, their Kwan, often refers to the father's birthplace or ancestral origin.
And this distinction is a deep cultural anchor that defines identity in Vietnam. It means that even a lifelong urban dweller, a product of the metropolis, carries this essential, often cherished connection to an ancestral and frequently agrarian past. The source provides the specific example of Bến Tre.
Bến Tre, which is in the Mekong Delta.
Exactly, famous for its coconuts and its rivers. When the speaker articulates that their cultural root is Bến Tre, they are showing that they understand the implicit cultural question being asked. They are connecting their cosmopolitan present back to the fertile riverine heritage of the Delta.
So this dual identity Saigon resident, Delta descendant, it provides immense depth.
It does. It explains how tradition maintains a link to family lineage and provides cultural stability amidst this rapid, almost dizzying urbanization.
If you can articulate this dual identity, you're demonstrating not just geographical knowledge, but a much deeper understanding of the societal architecture and the cultural stability that underpins modern Vietnamese life. It's a powerful differentiator.
And now we tackle the immediate lived reality of HCMC life, the high-stakes trade-off of living in a globally relevant metropolis. The speaker explains their strong preference for staying in Saigon. They are a sucker for the allure of metropolises.
A sucker for it, that idiom is fantastic. It suggests an irresistible, almost magnetic draw, especially when citing the vibrant nightlife. It paints the city as this dynamic, exciting force that's just difficult to resist.
It's a very emotional acknowledgement of the city's charm. However, that magnetic allure comes with a price tag that is described in some pretty visceral terms.
The sources introduce the term criminally expensive, specifically for rent in the city center. This isn't just saying it's expensive, it's using hyperbole to convey real financial pain.
Precisely. This vivid language conveys the sharp reality of the financial trade-off for density, vitality, and convenience. And to illustrate that financial pain for you, the listener, we have to consider what that criminally expensive rent buys you in the city center. It's likely a very small footprint, constrained square footage, and often older housing stock.
So the hyperbole frames urban living as a necessary, but genuinely costly, sacrifice to be near the action.
Absolutely.
Given that cost, the residential strategy becomes less about preference and more about strategic efficiency. The speaker currently resides in District 3. This isn't the commercial epicenter, which is District 1, nor is it the emerging high-end district like Thao Dien. That serves a very specific purpose.
The profile of District 3 in the sources is highly detailed. It's described positively as being relatively quiet, featuring lots of old trees, which are highlighted as a rarity in a bustling city like this.
Yeah, that's a huge premium.
It is. In high-density environments, a green canopy and quiet streets are immense premiums. They define your quality of life and offer a vital psychological respite from the urban frenzy.
And the most critical advantage, linking back to their professional ambition, is its strategic location.
District 3 is a very strategic location because of its geography. It sits neatly between the high-cost commercial hub of District 1 and the international airport. So for someone pursuing a lucrative banking career in District 1, they need minimal commute friction.
Okay.
But they also need easy access for domestic and international travel, which the airport facilitates. District 3 offers the best balance: reduced rent compared to District 1, better quality of life with the trees, and quiet, and it maximizes commuter efficiency.
So the speaker has deliberately chosen a neighborhood that optimizes professional leverage and mitigates cost while sacrificing some of that extreme modern luxury.
Which leads us perfectly to the neighborhood's shortcomings. Despite the strategic value, the speaker has very specific criticisms, showing that they are keenly aware of their neighborhood's limitations compared to HCMC's newest developments.
The specific dislikes are, well, inevitable urban friction.
Yeah.
Traffic and gridlock during rush hour. That's the unavoidable cost of being strategically located.
But the second criticism is insightful about the changing urban consumption landscape, the modern amenities gap. The options for modern shopping malls and entertainment complexes are sorely lacking compared to newer, purpose-built areas like Thao Dien.
Thao Dien is worth pausing on. It's often characterized as the expat or high-income residential area, often in what was District 2. What does comparing District 3 to Thao Dien tell us?
It tells us that the speaker is critically aware of HCMC's differential development. Older, strategically dense areas like District 3 have historical value, location advantage, cultural depth. But the newest, high-end consumer experiences, the massive cinema complexes, international retail, spacious food courts, are migrating to or being developed in areas like Thaudian, which were often purpose-built on newer infrastructure.
So the speaker is demonstrating an understanding of where wealth and modern consumer culture are physically manifesting in the city.
Yes. The contrast drawn between the quiet, older, strategic location and the newer, amenity-rich Thaudian, combined with the use of the term sorely lacking, provides a highly contextualized and critical view of HCMC residential life. It links personal choice, cost, and urban infrastructure together beautifully.
And if infrastructure defines where you live, it absolutely defines how you move, which brings us to our next critical theme, transportation. Let's shift gears now to transportation, which is fundamentally dictated by the city's density, its climate, and its infrastructural realities. The source material immediately establishes the dominant mode using powerful, definitive vocabulary.
It confirms that the motorbike doesn't just dominate, it reigns supreme and is ubiquitous in Saigon. These words emphasize complete and total dominance. It is not just the most popular choice, it is the essential defining feature of the city streets.
And the expert reason provided directly connects this dominance to HCMC's physical structure. Why is the motorbike the ideal vehicle in this environment?
Well, because HCMC is defined by two physical constraints: the sheer volume of humanity and the irregularity of the urban map. The city is full of narrow alleys, the hum, and it suffers from chronic congestion. The geometry of the city basically mandates the vehicle.
So a motorbike allows one to maneuver through the heavy traffic much more efficiently than a car could.
Much more efficiently.
We need to paint a vivid picture of what that maneuvering looks like for you, the listener, especially for those who haven't experienced it. What makes the motorbike so efficient in that chronic congestion?
It's the art of filtering. When traffic comes to a complete standstill, cars are trapped. They're just stuck. But the sheer narrowness of the motorbike allows drivers to filter, to weave slowly and methodically between stationary or slow-moving cars, trucks, and other motorbikes.
They can use every available inch of tarmac.
Every single inch. They often ride close to the curb or even on sidewalks for short stretches just to bypass the gridlock. A car, even a small one, requires a full lane. The motorbike requires only a fraction of that, allowing for constant, albeit slow, forward movement.
That functionality explains why the soundscape of HCMC is defined by the constant hum and buzz of millions of two-wheeled engines, right?
Absolutely. The efficiency is sensory as well as functional. The agility and the size are what prevent the city from seizing up entirely. The infrastructure simply cannot support car density, making the motorbike not a preference, but an indispensable tool for economic mobility and daily life.
What's fascinating is how this chaotic dominance translates into affordability. The sources describe travel as dirt cheap and quite affordable.
The low cost of movement is critical to the city's economic ecosystem. And while public buses exist and are mentioned as dirt cheap, the sources immediately pivot to the modern reliance on technology that optimizes the motorbike fleet. Ride-hailing applications like Grab or Bee.
Let's call them out. Grab and Bee are essentially the digital infrastructure built on top of the physical motorbike reality. Why is this combination, this low base cost plus technological efficiency, so key to HCMC life?
The benefit of these apps is highlighted very clearly. They provide a cost-effective way to travel door-to-door without the hassle of parking. In a city where finding parking for a car is often a non-starter, and even parking a motorbike requires strategic maneuvering and fees, the sheer convenience of being dropped off at your precise destination is a vital efficiency tool.
So you eliminate the friction of searching, maneuvering, and paying for parking.
Completely. And you do it all while leveraging the motorbike's superior ability to navigate the narrow street structure.
So the ride-hailing ecosystem fundamentally transforms the ubiquitous motorbike fleet into an efficient, personalized, and constantly available public service. It essentially bypasses the need for expensive, high-capacity subway or light rail systems in the interim.
Exactly. It's a digital solution layered onto an analog infrastructural problem. It's an efficiency hack born out of pure necessity.
Finally, we get a quick snapshot of the local escape mechanism. Everyone needs a break from the chronic congestion and the high-stakes environment of HCMC. The last travel destination mentioned was Vung Tau.
Vung Tau is contextualized perfectly, and this provides another layer of deep local knowledge. It's described as a coastal city that is a short drive from HCMC, boasting decent beaches and decadent seafood.
Let's look at those descriptors. Decent beaches implies it's not some remote exotic paradise, but it's certainly functional and satisfying for a quick break.
Mm.
And decadent seafood highlights the specific, high-quality culinary experience that makes the trip worthwhile.
This contextual note is essential. The sources emphasize that Vung Tau is not an exotic destination in the global sense, but it's a vital, essential spot for Saigonese people seeking a quick, accessible escape. It's a place to cross off your bucket list.
Using that idiom, cross off your bucket list, applied to a quick local beach trip is fascinating.
It shows that even localized, necessary rituals like escaping the urban pressure cooker are framed within this grand, aspirational language. Fundamentally, the Vung Tau trip serves a practical, psychological purpose, to break free from the HCMC concrete and congestion for a weekend. It's an indispensable component of life in the metropolis.
The transportation section, therefore, gives us an insight into how the city's physical form dictates its movement. The dominance of the motorbike, the efficiency of the digital overlay, and the necessity of the local escape route.
And that escape is often temporary because when you return to HCMC, you are immediately bombarded by our final thematic element, the omnipresent, highly competitive world of advertisements.
Our final theme deals with the visual and economic landscape of HCMC. Much like motorbikes, the ads are described as ubiquitous, especially in HCMC, defining the city's visual noise.
Absolutely. This confirms the sensory reality of the city. We are given the immediate scale of the marketing effort. This isn't just about small, localized flyers. It's about massive LED billboards dominating skylines and digital ads flashing on every platform, from apps to street screens.
And what's the specific human strategy behind this visual onslaught? The sources highlight celebrity endorsements. The anecdote provided, famous singers promoting everything from bubble tea to banking apps, tells us a great deal about the consumer culture.
It signals a consumer market that is highly susceptible to, or at least saturated with, celebrity influence. In a competitive market, attaching a famous, recognizable face to a product, whether it's a trivial consumer item like bubble tea or a serious financial product like a banking app, is a rapid shortcut to building trust and brand awareness.
It's an aggressive, high-cost strategy that bypasses slow, rational decision-making.
Completely.
This mass saturation raises the obvious high-level economic question. Why this intense, relentless volume of advertising?
The sources provide a sharp, direct economic answer. It all comes down to the fact that competition is fierce in this rapidly developing city. The economic boom means new foreign players, dozens of new domestic products, and just less room to distinguish yourself on quality or heritage alone.
Can we elaborate on the nature of that competition? Is it mainly local brands fighting each other, or is it foreign investment challenging local hegemony?
I think it's a really complex mix. It is global brands fighting for market share against highly agile local competitors, and it's local giants fighting off new startups. Because the consumer base is so youthful and rapidly changing, brand loyalty is very fluid.
So you have to constantly win them over.
Constantly. To succeed, companies must spend big bucks on what the sources call saturation marketing. The goal is explicitly simple: to increase brand awareness and just stand out from your rivals.
Saturation marketing means constant visibility, right?
Yeah.
It means forcing the brand into the consumer's conscious and subconscious mind until it feels like a natural part of the environment.
Exactly. In a market this crowded, if you aren't ubiquitous, if you aren't visually loud on LED billboards, constantly popping up in apps and endorsed by the top singers, you simply disappear into the noise. The sheer volume of advertising is a direct, visible reflection of the economic intensity and competition driving HCMC forward. It's an economic arms race played out on the city's facade.
This visual and economic barrage leads to the ultimate impact, the psychological influence. The sources take a very sophisticated view here, acknowledging that ads manipulate our behavior subconsciously.
And this is a critical viewpoint. It recognizes that advertising is not simply informational. It is a meticulously calculated tool designed to bypass rational thought and influence immediate action. The speaker isn't just observing the ads, they are providing a high-level critique of marketing ethics and psychological mechanics.
And that manipulation often culminates in what the source calls the impulse cycle. They discuss how enticing adverts lead to buying items on impulse. This is the short-term power of manipulation laid bare, the immediate gratification driven by visual noise and celebrity appeal.
And the cycle concludes with a truly critical observational point. one often rooted in personal experience or societal observation. The chances are the consumer ends up discarding the item later. This is the stark realization of the short-term, often wasteful power of advertising manipulation. The speaker is demonstrating a critical awareness that the very tools driving HCMC's economy, this fierce competition and saturation marketing, also drive potentially wasteful consumer behavior.
That psychological analysis provides a very powerful, high-level conclusion to our thematic discussions, connecting the city's economic drive directly to its consumer culture.
Mm.
That was an immensely detailed deep dive, and it was distilled entirely from what were essentially communication guide sources. We took that linguistic foundation, the necessity of precision, contextual grounding, and critical hedging, and used it to unlock 4 complex thematic pillars of life in Ho Chi Minh City.
We covered the competitive work environment, emphasizing the need for education to be applicable to the dynamic local markets and the ambition required to be tenacious and lucrative in District 1. We explored cultural identity, noting the critical Ben-Mekong Delta Kwan roots juxtaposed against the criminally expensive allure of Saigon.
We analyzed the transport reality, confirming the functional necessity of the motorbike, which reigns supreme due to chronic congestion and is made efficient by the modern digital layer of ride-hailing apps.
And finally, we saw how fierce competition drives saturation marketing visible on massive LED billboards, leading to subconscious impulse purchases and often eventual discarding.
The key takeaway, I think, is the transformative power of detail and specialized vocabulary. When you exchange generalities for specific, highly contextualized terms, UH3, thou de men, criminally expensive, you elevate a simple statement from a basic observation to a truly well-informed viewpoint grounded in specific local realities.
It transforms generic commentary into contextualized knowledge. It turns you from a purist into an insider. We analyzed how effective communication grounds itself in reality by using specific institutions, locations, and cultural context. So if specificity makes communication powerful, consider this for yourself. What local details about your current environment, your school, your commute, your workplace, your hometown, are currently being overlooked in your own conversations?
That's a great question.
Are you just saying your rent is expensive, or can you articulate why the location is strategic, using a comparison to a neighboring district? How could articulating those precise details, naming the specific street, the actual infrastructure challenge, the true local costs, transform your own ability to connect, inform, and communicate with authority to others? Think about what happens when you start grounding your general observations in your specific lived reality. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we take that huge stack of material you've gathered, all the articles, the notes, the research, and we find the core of it.
Exactly. We don't just summarize. We really try to distill it to find those surprising essential insights that let you feel truly informed without, getting overwhelmed.
And the material for today it's particularly fascinating. There's a real duality here.
There really is. On one hand, we're looking at some very high-level, almost technical English communication strategies, the kind of stuff you'd need for, say, a Band 9.0 proficiency.
Super advanced.
Right. But we're using that linguistic framework to decode some really deep, really specific cultural observations.
And the focus is on the modern lifestyle in Ho Chi Minh City.
Ho Chi Minh City, or HCMC. And of course, many people still lovingly call it Saigon. It's this fast-paced, modern, and often very contradictory place.
That's it. So our mission today is to show you that real fluency, it's not just about getting the grammar right, it's about cultural intelligence. And we have 4 major themes pulled from this material. We're going to dive into career ambition in this super competitive urban setting.
Then we'll look at the surprising relevance of handwriting in a world dominated by keyboards.
And then how things like fashion and materialism work as tactical tools, how they signal status.
And finally, a big one. The absolute necessity of patience in a city that is, let's be honest, defined by chaos.
Right. And we're not just giving you vocabulary lists.
No, not at all. We want to show you how something that seems tiny, like the schwa sound in English, is actually directly connected to how competent people think you are.
And how using a more complex sentence, like a concession clause, can show a kind of maturity of thought that's, well, essential for getting ahead in HCMC.
So get ready for some real aha moments.
We're going to unpack why young, really ambitious professionals in Saigon feel, and this is a direct quote, caged in their traditional office jobs.
We'll also explore the tactical need to be, at times, a little ostentatious in a business meeting.
And we will explain in what might be painful detail for anyone who's been there, why getting through Saigon traffic isn't just a commute.
It's the ultimate test of your character. It really is.
Okay, let's jump right in. Let's get to the grind.
So we're starting with Chapter 17, which is all about ambition, careers, and the very specific, very intense pressures you find in the professional world of HCMC.
The hustle is real there. But the material makes a great point right at the start. Before you can even think about landing that dream job, you have to sound the part. You have to sound credible.
Absolutely. The foundation for sounding like an advanced speaker isn't, knowing a million obscure words. It's about getting the basic mechanics right, consistently.
And the source hones in on one thing in particular.
It does. The mandatory mastery of the 3 different sounds for the past tense suffix, ed. It seems small, but it's crucial.
Okay, break that down for us, the 3 sounds.
Because you have the D sound, like in the word stopped. Then there's the D sound, like in played. And finally, the id sound for words that already end in a T or D, like wanted.
And getting those distinct sounds right is a clear marker.
It is. But the source is also practical. It acknowledges that trying to remember the specific phonetic rule for every single verb, especially when you're in the middle of a conversation, it's tough.
So what's the workaround? What's the core goal?
The foundational goal is much simpler. Just make sure you pronounce a clear final consonant. Don't swallow the sound.
Ah, so the big sin is making walked sound exactly the same as walk.
Exactly. When you drop that sound, the listener's brain has to do extra work to figure out the timeline. Am I hearing about now or about the past?
I see. So that little bit of phonetic clarity isn't just about passing an exam.
Not at all. It's about respecting the person you're talking to. It reduces their cognitive load.
Yeah.
And when you do it right, it immediately signals a higher level of attention to detail, which in a professional setting translates to polish and competence.
Clarity equals credibility. I like that. So, okay, once we've got that phonetic foundation, how do we start showing that our thinking is just as sophisticated as our pronunciation?
That's where we make the jump to the Band 7 upgrade, using concession clauses. This is a huge tactical move in communication.
Why is it so powerful?
Well, think about it. Simple sentences just present ideas in a line. This happened, then this happened. Advanced thinking, though, is about seeing the complexity, the contradictions.
It's about holding 2 opposing ideas in your head at the same time.
Precisely. So instead of just saying but, you use a structure that weighs those factors.
So what are the structures we're talking about?
The source points to although nullize plus clause, or despite plus noun being.
And the example given is, even though the salary is low, I love the job.
A perfect example. A less advanced speaker might say, the salary is low, but I love my job. It's okay, but it's not as strong.
Why not? What makes the even there structure better?
Because it subordinates the negative idea. It's saying, yes, I've considered the low salary, I've weighed it, and I've decided my love for the job is more important. It puts the negative in its place, so to speak.
It demonstrates a more mature thought process. You're not just stating 2 facts, you're showing the relationship between them.
That's it. It signals intellectual maturity.
And that maturity is exactly what we need as we look at how ambition itself evolves in HCMC. Let's dig into the 9.0 strategy here through the Q&A and the source material. It starts with childhood dreams.
Right. And the initial dream is very aspirational and universal. The speaker wanted to be a firefighter.
And they use that great phrase, being yay high, so knee high, and just being totally in awe of the bravado, the heroism of it all.
But it's not just some generic dream. The source is careful to ground it in a very specific local reality.
The narrow alleys of Saigon, that detail is everything. They're not just imagining saving people from any old building, but from a fire in that very specific labyrinthine urban landscape. It makes the heroism feel so much more immediate and, well, necessary.
It does. But then, of course, the realities of a booming capitalist city start to kick in. And the Q&A shows this massive shift that happened during university.
Okay, so the dream changes.
Dramatically. Suddenly, the speaker is dead set on a completely different path. They want to be a stockbroker.
Wow, that is a complete 180. From rescuing people in alleys to, trading stocks in a high-rise, what drove that change?
Pure visibility. Your status. The source says it was driven by seeing the lavish lifestyle of the finance workers, all concentrated in District 1.
The financial heart of the city.
Exactly. They represented fast money, flashy success, power. It's a perfect illustration of how ambition in a rapidly developing economy can pivot from something intrinsic like community service to something extrinsic all about material signals. The status was just so visible, so powerful.
I get it. It's less about the work itself and more about creating a life that just screams, I've made it in this incredibly competitive city.
But then comes the second pivot, which is the real insight here.
They reject that path too.
They do. The speaker realizes that they actually value work-life balance more than just chasing a paycheck. This is a huge point of maturation.
So what was the realization? What did they see?
They saw the hidden cost of that lavish lifestyle, the crushing stress, the non-existent personal life, maybe even a lack of real meaning in the work.
So they stopped wanting to follow in the footsteps of those flashy finance guys.
Right. They recognized that old trap. The grass is always greener on the other side.
Yeah.
The allure of pure wealth just wasn't enough once they got a closer look at what it actually cost.
And that tension, that pull between the desire for status and the need for a real life, that leads us straight into what the source calls the HCMC corporate clash. The speaker's future plans are really telling here. They're thinking about a master's degree abroad, maybe Australia, maybe the US.
And that plan, that desire to leave, is really just a physical manifestation of that internal tension we were just talking about.
It's the feeling that the current situation is just too limiting, which brings back that grass is greener idea again.
It does, and the source really digs into the source of that friction. It's the feeling of being caged.
Caged by the conservative work culture in a traditional Vietnamese office. It's a strong word. What does that cage actually look like on a day-to-day basis?
It's a cage of unwritten rules. It's about strict hierarchy and expectations. In a lot of these more traditional corporate settings in HCMC, deference is valued way more than innovation.
So it's about not rocking the boat.
Exactly. Conformity is key. So that might mean mandatory team-building events or after-work drinking sessions that go late into the night because you feel like you can't leave before your boss does.
Even if your own work is done.
Right. And communication is strictly top-down. If you're a junior employee with a radical new idea, you can't just pitch it. It might be seen not as initiative, but as a challenge to the established way of doing things.
So the cage isn't made of bars. It's made of tradition and hierarchy. It restricts your freedom, your creativity, and ultimately your work-life balance. For a young person with a more global mindset, I can see how that would feel incredibly suffocating.
It is suffocating. You feel trapped by these rigid expectations, unable to really use your full potential. And that directly leads to that desire to escape, to get that master's abroad, and basically hit reset on your career, hoping to find a more flexible, modern environment.
Which brings us to the vocabulary of this whole experience, the power phrases that define this high-pressure world. Let's start with the economic trap you mentioned.
The golden handcuffs. It's such a brilliant term for this situation, and so relevant for those high-paying banking and corporate jobs in District 1.
The handcuffs are golden because the pay is so good.
Exactly. It's a high-status, high-paying job, but it's stressful, maybe it's soul-crushing, and you're trapped. You earn so much that the idea of leaving and taking a pay cut to do something you love feels impossible. Your lifestyle depends on it. You're financially stuck.
A gilded prison. And just to get to that point, to even be offered those handcuffs, the effort must be immense.
Oh, it's grueling. The source talks about the aggression you need just to climb the corporate ladder. In a market as competitive as HCMC, you are constantly fighting for a very small number of senior positions.
And the phrase used to describe that effort is pretty vivid.
Work my fingers to the bone. It just perfectly captures that feeling of sustained, intense, all-consuming labor. We're talking 12-hour days, weekends for years on end, just to keep your spot on that ladder.
And if you're doing all that just for the money, you're risking burnout and losing sight of any real purpose.
Right, which the source contrasts with the search for my true calling, that ideal job that actually aligns with who you are and what you value.
And if you don't find that calling, or if you're trapped by the golden handcuffs, you end up in a state of stagnation.
That's what the source calls being stuck in a rut. It's that awful feeling of boredom, of repetition, of knowing you're not growing or learning anything new. Just stuck.
Which, ironically, probably explains why the side hustle has become such a massive phenomenon among young professionals in Saigon.
It's a perfect solution, really. It serves two vital purposes.
The first one is obvious. Money.
Right. It's supplemental income in a city where the cost of living is rising fast. But the second purpose is, I think, even more important. It's an emotional release valve.
How so?
If your 9-to-5 corporate job is the rut, the cage, then the side hustle is where you get to be creative, entrepreneurial, and in control. It's your escape. It lets you pursue a passion that the conservative office environment might be stamping out.
So it's not just an economic necessity, it's a psychological one, a way to fight back against that feeling of being caged.
Precisely. It's a way of building a parallel path, one that's fulfilling, that's yours, and that mitigates the risk of being trapped by those golden handcuffs forever.
Okay, so now we're shifting gears a bit. We're moving from that intense, competitive corporate world to something much more subtle and emotional. Chapter 18, handwriting.
Right. This whole section is about the contrast between the efficiency of digital communication and the enduring value of putting pen to paper.
But first, we need to touch on another one of those foundational phonetic tips.
We do. We're moving from the clarity of the past tense sounds to the smoothness of the schwa sound. This is a big one. The source calls it a Band 6 foundation tip for making your English sound more native, more rhythmic.
The schwa, it's that weak, unstressed sound, right? It replaces the full vowel sound in syllables that aren't stressed.
Exactly. And this tiny little sound is, it's the key to the entire rhythm of spoken English. If you pronounce every single vowel fully and clearly, your speech will sound very robotic, very staccato.
Syllable by syllable.
Right. But when you reduce those unstressed vowels to the schwa, you naturally speed up, and your speech becomes more fluid. It flows.
The example in the source was changing camera, 3 syllables, into kamer.or, just 2 syllables. Can you give us another couple of examples to really nail this down?
Sure. Think about a common word like about. We don't say A-B-A. We say A's bet E. That first A becomes a schwa, or a word like banana.
Banana.
Right, but when we say it naturally, the first and last A's become weak, treaded on. It's all about putting the emphasis on the important part of the word, the stressed syllable, and letting the other syllables just flow into it.
So it's about creating waves of sound, not a series of sharp, distinct steps.
That's a great way to put it. Now let's look at the Band 7 upgrade for communication. Elevating how you say no.
Elevating the negative. I like the sound of that.
It's a really powerful stylistic move. Instead of just using simple direct negatives like I don't or no, high-level speakers will use more sophisticated negative adverbs.
Like what?
Like rarely, seldom, or hardly. So instead of saying I don't often write by hand, you could say I rarely write by hand, or I hardly ever put pen to paper.
Okay, but why is that actually better?
It adds a layer of precision and formality. It just sounds more considered. If you're in professional discussion saying I hardly ever receive handwritten memos, sounds much more polished than just, no, I don't get those.
It shows you're thinking about frequency and nuance, not just giving a blunt yes-no answer. It raises the level of the conversation.
Instantly.
So let's apply that precision to the topic itself. Penmanship. The 9.0 strategy here starts by just acknowledging the simple reality.
Right. Typing is the norm. You walk into any coffee shop in District 1 or Bin Thon, and what do you see?
A sea of laptops. Everyone is glued to their screens.
Exactly. But the source then asks, okay, given that reality, are there still functional, practical reasons why handwriting sticks around?
And the answer is yes. Beyond just the sentimental stuff, there's a real cognitive benefit that's highlighted.
Taking notes by hand during a meeting, the source claims it actually helps you remember the information better than typing everything out verbatim.
And there's actually a lot of cognitive science to back that up, isn't there? Typing can be a very passive act. You're just transcribing. Your brain isn't always engaging with the meaning.
That's the key. You can type much faster than you can write. So when you write by hand, you're forced to process the information in real time. You can't write down every single word, so you have to listen, synthesize, and decide what's most important to jot down.
You're summarizing as you go.
Right. And that act of filtering and summarizing is what helps lock the information into your memory. It's a functional advantage that the sheer speed of digital typing just can't replicate.
So looking at the future, the source argues handwriting won't ever fully disappear. It's just been marginalized.
Marginalized, but still called for in certain specific situations. And this is where the cultural context gets really interesting.
This is where handwriting becomes a tool for something else.
It becomes a tool for demonstrating labor-intensive care. This is a huge cultural cue, especially in many Asian societies, where showing respect often involves a visible, physical demonstration of effort.
And what are the key examples where that effort really, really matters?
They're all deeply personal and traditional moments. Writing a greeting card for Lunar New Year, for Tet, or drafting a formal love letter, or a big one, a wedding invitation. These are times when the physical act of writing communicates sincerity in a way a digital message can't.
You can feel the difference. A wedding invitation that comes in the mail, the heavy cardstock, the ink. It feels important. And Evite just doesn't carry the same weight.
Not at all. All of that tangible effort from the sender signals that they truly value you as a guest. It's a physical representation of respect and commitment. Speed is not the priority, sincerity is.
It is. Speaking of the quality of the script itself, let's run through some of the vocabulary from this section.
We have to start with the best one. The term for really bad handwriting is a chicken scratch.
And the local Vietnamese equivalent is apparently chest nu ga bui, which literally means writing as ugly as a chicken scratching. That's wonderfully descriptive.
It really is. And then you have the more technical terms. Legible, meaning it's easy to read, and illegible, meaning it's impossible to decipher.
And the source brings up a funny and apparently universal stereotype here.
That doctors are notorious for having chicken scratch.
It's true. I feel like every prescription I've ever gotten looks like a secret code that only the pharmacist can read.
It's a global phenomenon.
Yeah.
It's almost like having illegible handwriting is part of the job description for a doctor. But the core concept here is penmanship, the actual skill of writing beautifully.
Which the source calls a lost art.
And it is a lost art because it's no longer a daily utility. Its value has shifted from the practical to the purely sentimental.
It provides a personal touch.
A personal touch that an email just can't match. And that nostalgia even extends to the delivery system itself. We still use the term snail mail to describe the postal service.
As in, slow as a snail compared to the instant gratification of email.
But there's a romance to that slowness, isn't there?
Yeah.
Getting a real physical letter in this day and age feels special precisely because it's so rare and took so much effort.
The weight makes it more valuable. And the source brings up one last great idiom here about the moment of commitment.
To put pen to paper. It means to stop thinking or talking about something and to actually do it. To start writing that letter, or, more critically, to sign that contract.
It's the point of no return. It's fascinating how, even as our offices become more and more digital and efficient, this slow, labor-intensive form of communication still holds such a powerful symbolic and emotional place in our personal lives.
Okay, now we're shifting from the quiet, personal, active handwriting to the very loud, very public performance of status. Chapter 19 is all about consumer culture, style, and how appearance is used as a crucial signaling tool in HCMC.
But as always, before we get into the luxury bags and watches, we have to talk about how you deliver the message, the mechanics of sounding powerful.
We start with the rhythm of English, with sentence stress. The Band 6 rule here is absolutely fundamental. You have to stress the content words.
So the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives, the words that carry the meaning.
Exactly. And you have to glide over or minimize the function words, little words like the to, is.
And if you don't do this, if you stress every word equally,
You sound flat, monotone. And when every word sounds important, it means that no word is actually important. The listener can't easily pick out the key information.
the example from the source was love wearing watches, where the meaning words get the punch and the little function words like I and am are just breezed over.
Precisely. And let's connect this directly to the topic at hand.
Okay.
If you're in a high-stakes business meeting in Saigon and you're trying to project an image of success and confidence, but your speech is flat and lacks that natural rhythm, what happens?
You completely undermine the message. Your fancy suit says confidence, but your delivery says uncertainty.
Exactly. The linguistic polish has to match the visual polish. They are both part of the same status signal.
That makes perfect sense. Which brings us to the Band 7 upgrade, chunking, or basically pausing.
Pausing for processing. It's all about control. When the stakes are high, you don't want to sound rushed or nervous.
So you break your speech into logical chunks of meaning.
Right. You pause at commas at the end of a phrase. It does two things. It stops you from sounding like a breathless monotone, and crucially, it gives your listener a moment to actually absorb what you're saying.
In a tense negotiation, that pause can signal that you're thoughtful, that you respect the weight of your own words.
It signals control. And in the world of HCMC business, control is everything.
So let's apply that controlled delivery to the actual material goods. The Q&A in the source starts with watches.
Right. And the speaker says they wear one every day, but they immediately make a very careful distinction. They say they're not a full-on watch nerd, but they really appreciate the craftsmanship.
That's a key difference. It frames their interest as intellectual, not just about chasing a brand name.
It does, and they get specific. They talk about loving a mechanical Seiko, appreciating the dial, the leather strap, the internal movement. They call it a killer watch because it's reliable and well-made.
So the focus is on quality and engineering, not just the logo on the front.
Correct. But then the focus shifts to handbags, and the function of the object changes completely.
Here, it's explicitly discussed as a powerful status symbol, a way to show off.
A very clear way to show off. The source mentions bags made of exotic leathers that command a stratospheric price tag.
Stratospheric is a great word for it. It's for things that, as the idiom goes, cost an arm and a leg. These are items designed to send a very loud, very clear signal about your financial success.
They are. But here again, the source makes another crucial distinction. We have to separate the simple act of showing off from genuine intellectual passion.
You mean some people collect these things for a different reason?
Right. The source points out that there are legitimate fashion enthusiasts who collect these bags or watches because they're passionate about the design history, the artistry, the materials. For them, it's about being a connoisseur, not just about the status that comes with the price.
A necessary distinction to make before we get into the really controversial part, splurging. The source acknowledges that a lot of people see it as just wasteful and vain.
And yet, it mounts a strong defense of splurging. And it's all based on a cultural imperative.
Okay, this feels like the core insight of the whole section.
It is. The source argues that in the Asian business world, and especially in Saigon, appearance matters. And the logic behind this is purely transactional and risk-averse.
So what you're saying is looking successful is literally a requirement to be trusted in business.
That's precisely it. Imagine you're about to sign a huge deal with someone. You need to feel confident that they are stable, that they are successful, that they're not going to disappear tomorrow.
So you look for signals.
You look for signals. And sometimes you have to be a little ostentatious. Carrying that expensive bag, wearing that premium watch or a perfectly tailored suit, it's not about vanity. It's a calculated signal to the client that you are a serious, competent, and financially sound partner.
Looking too cheap could actually make you seem like a bigger risk.
A much bigger risk. It suggests instability. So in this context, the designer item isn't a frivolous expense. It's a strategic investment in building client trust.
That completely reframes the idea of splurging. It's not just personal, it's professional.
Which brings us back to the vocabulary. We've talked about cost. Let's talk about spending habits. The source mentions retail therapy.
Shopping to relieve stress.
Right. And then it mentions the opposite behavior, window shopping.
Which is what you do when you're living on a shoestring budget. You have very little money, but you still want to be in that atmosphere of luxury. So you walk through the high-end malls like Takashimaya or Vinkum Onghu and just look.
It's aspiration without the transaction. But when you are ready to make the transaction, to send that signal, you want to dress to kill or be dressed to the nines.
Perfectly elegant. Flawless.
And often, that whole look is built around one key accessory that acts as a statement piece, the one item that's designed to grab attention and immediately define you as successful.
But hold on a second. This all makes sense, but the source also acknowledges the reality of high-quality fakes, the knockoff, the replica that you can find in places like Denthon Market. If that's true, doesn't that make this entire professional signaling game a total sham? How can a client trust the signal if the statement piece might just be a really good fake?
And that is the brilliant paradox of status in a city like HCMC. You've hit on the key point of tension.
So how does it work?
The knockoff economy is huge because the desire for the signal of success is way more widespread than the ability to actually afford the stratospheric price tag.
So for everyday people, a good replica does the job.
It does the signaling job, yes. But in those elite, high-stakes business meetings, authenticity still quietly matters. It becomes this unspoken test. The experts, the people you're trying to impress, they can often tell the difference.
So it's a huge gamble. You're playing a game where the price of entry is looking rich, but if you're caught faking it, you lose all credibility instantly.
That's the game. It's a complex, high-stakes performance of appearance and perception, where you need the signal of wealth to build trust, but you're constantly at risk of being exposed as inauthentic.
It's fascinating. Okay, for our final section, we're moving from the external, the clothes, the watches, to the internal character you need to succeed. Chapter 20 is all about patience.
Which is a perfect follow-up, because if status demands you sometimes perform being ostentatious, maturity demands you practice emotional control.
And we start, again, with a communication fundamental, active listening. The Band 6 tip here is so important. It says, don't just listen for keywords.
Listen for the structure of the question.
Why is the structure so much more important?
Because structure reveals intent. The source gives a great example. The difference between do you like coffee and Would you like a coffee?
One is a general question about preference. The other is a specific offer.
Exactly. And if you're not listening to the structure, you might answer the offer as if it were just a general question, and you miss the social cue. You miss the invitation. In a business context, missing those nuances can be disastrous.
And the Band 7 upgrade is about projecting your own attitude through your voice, through intonation.
Using your vocal pitch to show emotion, a flat, monotone response, even if the words are positive, can signal boredom or disinterest.
Whereas changing your pitch shows you're engaged.
Right. The example of raising your pick at the end of "you have a master's degree" is perfect. It conveys genuine surprise, real engagement. Your attitude is now aligned with your words, which makes your communication so much more powerful.
And there is no greater test of attitude control than patience. The first question in this section asks a speaker to assess their own patience level.
And the answer is very realistic. Yes, for the most part. Because, as they say, living in Saigon absolutely forces you to be.
And this is where the source uses that powerful central metaphor for the city.
Saigon traffic is the ultimate test of your character.
Okay, let's not just say it's a test. Paint the picture for us.
Right.
Based on the source, what makes it the ultimate test? What's happening on those streets?
It's the constant, grinding, low-level chaos. It's not one big problem, it's 1,000 tiny ones. It's trying to navigate a river of thousands of motorbikes that seem to be flowing in every direction at once.
It's the noise.
The incessant, aggressive use of horns, which, yes, is a form of communication, but it's still an assault on the senses. It's the bikes mounting the pavement to get around a jam. It's the heat, the humidity, the complete lack of lane discipline. You are just constantly being bombarded with minor aggressions and logistical frustrations.
So if you have a short fuse, as the source puts it, if you're easily angered,
You will spend your entire life in Saigon in a state of simmering rage. It's that simple. Patience stops being a nice little virtue and becomes a basic requirement for your own mental health.
a survival skill.
It is.
Yep.
And it gets directly connected to politeness. The source says it's one of the key attributes of a polite, respected person in that environment.
And the focus is on being rational. So if someone cuts you off or maybe offends you in a meeting, the patient response is to pause.
To be willing to hear them out. It's about creating that crucial space between the thing that happens and your reaction to it. You don't just explode.
You give them a chance to explain.
Right? Maybe they made an honest mistake. Maybe they're in a real emergency. The mature, rational approach is to gather information and then decide if it's better to just let it slide instead of escalating a minor issue into a major conflict.
This all backs up that old saying, patience is a virtue. The source defines a mature person as someone who can keep their cool under exactly this kind of intense pressure.
And it also defines the consequence of impatience. A quick temper, being someone who is fast to chew people out or who starts making a scene in public,
Yeah.
that does not get you respect.
No, it does the opposite.
It signals immaturity, a total lack of self-control. And it completely undermines that polished, successful image that the same person might be spending thousands of dollars on clothes and accessories to project. Your bad temper can undo all of that in an instant.
Composure earns respect, not confrontation. Okay, let's quickly review the vocabulary for keeping that composure.
First, you have the informal, friendly way to tell someone to slow down. Hold your horses. Then you have the state of ultimate calm. Being cool as a cucumber, which is a synonym for keeping your cool.
And my favorite one, the active choice you make to prevent a conflict.
To bite my tongue. To deliberately stay silent when you really, really want to say something angry. It's an act of will.
So what happens when that wheel is about to break? When the stress is just too much? We need the vocabulary for losing it.
When you've had enough, you're at the end of my rope. You're completely frayed, totally out of patience. You can feel that my patience is wearing thin.
And the one final event that pushes you over the edge.
That is the last straw. The small, insignificant thing that finally makes you snap.
And lastly, the source gives a warning against reacting too quickly based on anger or incomplete information.
Don't jump the gun. Don't act or accuse before you know the whole story. It's the classic mistake of the impatient person. The contrast couldn't be clearer.
External success might be signaled by a fancy watch, but internal mastery, true respect, is shown by your ability to stay rational and calm when the entire city is testing you. #tag outro.
So that was a pretty deep dive. We started with the tiniest phonetic details, like the 3 sounds of the DD ending.
And the schwa sound. And we ended up decoding these incredibly sophisticated social and professional codes that really define modern life in Ho Chi Minh City.
We saw the unbelievable pressures on young professionals there, that tension that makes them feel caged by a conservative office culture,
The seductive trap of the golden handcuffs that keeps them in jobs they might not love.
and the absolute necessity of a side hustle, not just for money, but as an emotional and creative escape.
And we really saw how high-level communication is so much more than just words. It requires a deep understanding of the culture.
We analyzed why some messages have to be labor-intensive, like a handwritten New Year's card to show you care.
And we unpacked the counterintuitive reason why you sometimes have to be ostentatious in business to signal stability and win a client's trust.
Ultimately, true fluency isn't just about knowing how to use a concession clause. It's about deploying the right attitude at the right time.
It's about knowing when to wear that statement piece to project success.
And maybe more importantly, knowing that when you're stuck in that traffic, the real test is whether you can choose to be cool as a cucumber and rational instead of losing your temper and making a scene.
This material really gives you the tools not just to, speak English better, but to think more critically about how these social and professional games are actually played in one of the most dynamic cities on the planet.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to take away.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've established that success in HCMC can demand that you signal wealth through ostentatious items. It's a focus on the external presentation of success to gain trust.
Right.
But we also saw that true maturity and the deep respect of your peers is ultimately earned through the internal ability to keep one's cool and remain rational in incredibly frustrating situations.
So external signaling versus internal control.
Exactly. So the question for you is this. Given the constant, intense pressures of a city like Saigon, which of these two demands, the external performance of status or the internal mastery of emotion, is actually more difficult to sustain over the long run? And which one ultimately is the true definition of success in that kind of complex modern environment?
That is definitely something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you'll keep exploring these themes, ambition, style, and patience, and how they shape life in the city. We'll see you next time.
Được thành lập 2018 bởi nhóm giáo viên đã có nhiều năm công tác tại các trung tâm lớn uy tín ở thành phố Hồ Chí Minh. DS Focus không chỉ có các bạn học viên giỏi là các bạn tiến sĩ, bác sĩ, nghiên cứu sinh, các bạn học trường chuyên, mà còn có các bạn học sinh lớp thường đạt được điểm số Ielts và TOEIC cao nhờ vào phát triển được năng lực tiếng Anh thực thụ. Khác biệt với các trung tâm lớn, đông đúc, dùng chung một quyển giáo trình rập khuôn cho hàng ngàn học viên, lúc đi thi gây nhàm chán cho giám khảo chấm điểm. Đa số các chương trình online hay học trực tiếp tại thành phố Hồ Chí Minh của DS Focus chỉ tầm 3 đến 7 học viên, dễ dàng theo sát các bạn, giúp tối đa hóa điểm số nhờ tích hợp nhiều phương pháp trong suốt quá trình giảng dạy. 100% lớp học luyện đề được hướng dẫn bởi thầy Quốc Khánh, IELTS 8.5, Reading 9.0, Listening 9.0 và không có band điểm nào dưới 8. Các bạn có thể theo học tại quận 6, quận 2, quận 9 và quận 11. Nếu các bạn ở xa, có thể chọn hình thức học online, giáo viên vẫn có thể theo sát được các bạn vì sĩ số lớp vừa phải.
Waves rolling in so slow. Trust the tide, let go. Ooh, yeah. Deep blue, take me home. Feel the calm in my soul. Stars above guide me right. Moonlight whispers through the night. Ocean breath, pure and true. Every wave brings me you. In the